This House is in session. Prior to the suspension on yesterday's date, this Honourable Chamber was in standing Finance Committee. To that we resume.
This House is in standing Finance Committee. When we suspended, we were under Head 83, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security.
To that we now revert.
To that we now revert. Let me also remind honourable members and our guests, the Honourable Minister has 5 minutes to respond to any particular question. Our guests would have, or any of the officers would have 3 minutes to respond. Please, as much as possible, stick within the time frames that you have been allowed according to the rules. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Pleasure to continue our presentation in this Appropriation Bill 2022, where we are presenting the work of the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security. Today we have again the team of Mr. Terry Bascom, Permanent Secretary, Ms. Keely Holder, Chief Agriculture Officer, Mrs. Cheryl Morris-Skeet, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Dr. Beverly Wood, Government Analytical Services Director, Dr. Mark Trotman, Veterinary Services Senior Veterinary Officer, Ms. Kimberly Coppin, Financial Controller, Mr. Sherlock King, Manager of Markets, Mr. Michael James, Senior Agriculture Officer, Mr. Glenn Marshall, Senior Agriculture Officer, Dr. Leroy McLean, Consultant, Mr. Wayne Baker, Projects Director, Mr. Orlando Affley, CEO, BAMC, Mr. Frederick Ennis, CEO, Acting, BADMC, Mr. Anthony Bryan, Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority Chairman, Dr. Jamaica Andwele, Manager, Agricultural Services, BADMC, Mr. Robert Saul, Chief Economist Acting, Ministry of Agriculture, and Senator Shanika Roberts-Odle, Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Sorry, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to ask the Minister and his team a couple of questions, and there are they were in my mind from yesterday and the events of last night and this morning with the Russian invasion of Ukraine brings it forcibly to mind. And it relates to the, I think, very positive and far-sighted decision of the Prime Minister to title the ministry, the Ministry of Agriculture and Food and Nutritional Security. And with that kind of a mandate, and with strange people doing strange things in other parts of the world, the question I have for the minister and his team is what, while we have a pretty good understanding of food security, I believe, how is the ministry approaching the matter of nutritional security, given that the ministry's, the nomenclature that is used to describe the portfolio speaks to food and nutritional security? And I heard the comments, the information shared about the work to increase crop production and yields and that kind of thing. The nutritional security component, how is the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security approaching that component of its mandate? And I'll ask the follow-up after.
Thank you, Honourable Member. You may recall that yesterday we mentioned the relationship with the FAO and the establishment of the Parliamentary Fronts Against Hunger. And under SDG 2, the target is for us to reach zero hunger by 2030, but equally to make sure that we reduce, as far as possible, nutrition. And perhaps I should speak to this in the context of what this is intended to achieve, because I've said before that people who may believe that they are having a well-balanced meal but eating a large portion of macaroni pie and a large portion of rice, 2 pieces of sweet potato, 2 pieces of English potato, a pork chop, chicken leg, and a piece of fish. That in itself is not nutritious, and it's really not a balanced diet. So you can have meals where you'll be overnourished or undernourished, and the Parliamentary Fronts Against Hunger is for us to bring about these changes where we work through the stakeholders like the Barbados Diabetic Association, and produce through the ministries that are linked to this, which will be education, Ministry of Health and Wellness, Ministry of Commerce, for us to be able to come up with programs to sensitize people in terms of what they should be eating, set programs within communities, and I've started to engage people like the Optimist Club, and certainly there are others who are involved in plant-based diets that I've spoken to as well. The whole thrust of all this is to encourage people to shift from eating processed foods and packaged foods. I wouldn't call brands, but we are all familiar with the amount of foods that are laden with dyes, etc. And in order for us to be able to transition people from that type of dietary habit, we need to get these stakeholders on board who would lead the conversation, whilst we provide the support for them to be able to achieve the objective of transitioning people and changing their dietary habits to more healthy eating. This, when tied to food security, where we are creating our own seed bank, and I think it is critical. You did mention people doing foolish things in this current day and age. If ever there was a time for us to focus on food security, this is the time, because we now need to forge ahead with the establishment of a seed bank in Barbados, and the establishment also for us to be able to look at how we can create our own hatching eggs. For if there is a supply chain disruption, we can still continue on this work we're doing in conjunction with Guyana. So that once we can get the production, once we can get the healthy food, once we can get consistency in supply, then we will break the back of what we consider to be unhealthy diets and get people to transition to more nutritional foods. And that is where the nutritional aspect of all of this comes in.
Thank you very much, Minister. And please, as the Minister responsible for the third sector, to hear of your engagement with the civil society organizations that are related, that have a direct interest in the matter of nutrition and the nutrition of our people. And I heard you also mention optimists. I'm aware that they're working with children, and I may want to assume that that means you're engaging with the ministry responsible for education as well, so that we get that same kind of push or approach in our school system. I want to continue on the matter of security. What is the ministry doing? And let me just give the preface of what I'm saying. My late best friend, who is also known, one of his best friends is also a part of your team, but he was once an employee of the ministry that you have the privilege to lead. And one of the things he did, and the question is based on an experience that he had, one that I shared, which was the setting up of facilities for growing specialty crops using very inexpensive methods. The question I'm asking has to do with the fact that there are people who have very little capital, but who may want to get involved in the production of food. And as an example, he used shade houses for his sweet peppers, but he didn't use the fancy stuff in terms of the metal and the expensive sheeting. He used old pine and the least expensive sheeting, and was able to make, I think, a decent return, very decent return from that. My question is, I've heard a lot of focus on the new technologies, and I'm wondering if there's any scope in the ministry's program. You have Head 160, I think, which speaks to crop production or increasing crop production. My question is there any scope in the ministry's program that allows for easier entry into crop production using what may be considered by some in this more modern era to be cutting-edge technology? Is there any scope for bringing people in who only have maybe $1,000 and can afford some 2x4s and some of the cheap sheeting for them to start? Is there any facility for that, or are we focusing only on the newer and sometimes more expensive technologies?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Yes, I think you hit the nail on the head. The paper that we are presenting to Cabinet for increased production speaks to the use of shade houses, similar to what you were speaking of. And also we have at the BADMC a small greenhouse that is commissioned to train people to how to grow in greenhouses. The cost of it, once the person comes in under the feed program, the ministry through the BADMC actually carries the cost of getting them started, and then through the Agriculture Development Fund, where we have funds allocated for these types of initiatives, the person can also be given a leg up. So at the BADMC under the feed program, we have facilities to train people, and then of course, once they're ramping up and going to scale through the Agriculture Development Fund, they can be assisted. The Chief Agriculture Officer spoke yesterday about the 25 shade houses that are going to be donated to us by the government of Guyana, and we are also going to be purchasing an additional 25, so we will have 50 of those at the disposal of people. They're very basic shade houses. They're simple, and of course they don't carry all the expensive fittings to be set up. What I would do is invite the Chief Agriculture Officer to respond to this, and then also allow for the ADMC, the CEO acting, to speak to where we are with the facility we have at the ADMC.
Thank you, Minister. Good afternoon, members of Parliament. My name is Keely Holder, Chief Agricultural Officer. As it relates to low-tech solutions, yes, definitely there has to be a combination of both high-tech, high-cost solutions, but the need for low-tech is also very important. And here's why. Because we're a small country, it means that high-tech often comes with large costs. So, for example, we are working with the BADMC to develop a rain-fed agricultural program, which would look at being able to maximize lands on rain-fed agriculture. So this would reduce the cost of the need for the infrastructure related around irrigation, and also currently, because of our water issues, we would need to have systems like that in place. But there are also other types of low-tech solutions that we have been looking at, particularly because we understand that once you set up a high-tech system, it means that you must have a high level of skill. So it will take time for small farmers or small persons to be able to develop that level of skill. So we want to be able to provide a varying set of options where all persons who are keen and interested in farming as a profession can be able to participate in that regard. Thank you.
Mr. Ennis.
Hi, good evening, members of Parliament. My name is Frederick Innes. I am the CEO acting at BADMC. Yes, I think it is. Right. So in terms of the greenhouse training that has been mentioned, we have actually completed the construction of one small structure which is using fiberglass type exterior. Unfortunately, it was finished just before the impact of COVID, and the space is actually quite limited. So we have held back from bringing persons into that space and given restrictions on how we actually do this training. But however, within our online training program, we have introduced the module to introduce persons to greenhouse training and to have an introduction at least to how that solution works within the agricultural sector. In addition, we have also deployed quite recently a freight farm, what we refer to as container farm growing, and we are readying that also to be added once we can. I think now that we've started to ease up on the restrictions, we can start bringing persons in on a rotational basis so that they get the exposure. As the CEO mentioned, it is quite technical once you do get into fully enclosed greenhouse structures. So it is something that you would really want to have persons have a strong understanding before they moved into assuming these things on their own. Even with the cheaper solutions, be it shade house or whatever, it does have some challenges that persons would not necessarily experience in open fields. So we want to make sure that persons get good exposure before they deploy any funds, any capital into this type of operation.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I just want to commend you and your team for the work you're doing. I think, Minister, you know how I feel about agriculture, and particularly your leadership and the experience, commercial experience that you bring to bear for what I think the world is realizing is a very significant but vitally important sector, and I applaud your leadership. Thank you very much for the responses.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to the Chamber and to the members of the Ministry of Agriculture, Food Security. Minister Weir, I want to start by congratulating you and your team. If we look at the record of agriculture in this country over the past 4 years, well, close to 4 years, it's a very good record, and it would be remiss of me to enter this chamber to ask a question on whatever, black belly sheep or whatever, livestock production, root crop production. And don't compliment the team for the sterling work that they have done on behalf of this government. And there I want to start. But having said that, I will go directly into the estimate before me on the sub-program 0199 to stimulate and sustain livestock production through the provision of research and developmental services to the livestock sector. And that program speaks specifically to black belly sheep. This is a pretty important industry, not only important, but a lucrative industry in that we know, and you have articulated it in your sub-program statement, to create a viable industry for high quality, affordable lamb and to provide hides for the manufacture of value-added leather goods. So we see the importance not only in agriculture, but moving and vertically integrating into industry using the sheep leather to produce goods for export as well. And I am wondering, looking at your sub-program, where you have allocated in this year's estimate only $260,000 in this area of livestock production, re black belly sheep. And knowing very well that we have a huge import bill of lamb in this country, averaging in the millions. I think it is over 10 million. And someone told me recently it is roughly around averaging some $14 million. So my question to you is, what are your plans to increase the production of black belly sheep, knowing the importance of this, I don't want to say animal, but this key industry to the viability of agriculture and to industry in this country? So that's my first question to you.
Honourable member, before you respond, just let me say to you and the team, we are having a bit of a challenge a bit in hearing some of the responses. So I'm asking persons speaking to come a bit closer to the mic so that we can hear you clearly here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Honourable Member, for the acknowledgement of the work that the ministry and the team that is working with me is doing on behalf of this country, and indeed for us to be able to reach our objectives in providing food security, food sovereignty, and of course nutritional food. The question you raised on black belly sheep, and in referencing the sub-program in Head 83, we do a substantial amount of research work in livestock, and through the ministry's main function is to provide that type of research and development support. The expansion of the black belly sheep program will come as part of the program's work, and Dr. Leroy McLean is here with us. He's responsible for the black belly sheep program, and I would love for him to respond first of all to what we are doing in order for us to be able to increase the production of black belly sheep in Barbados. And then the CAO would mention the conversation, she would address the conversation we had in Guyana, and indeed what we are putting together in order for us to be able to reach 1 million heads by the established time that has been set.
Well, thank you, Minister, and good evening to the Chairman and members of Parliament. Honourable Member, I'm happy to respond to you to this question. And first thing I would like to mention is that in your constituency and on the other side in the north, we have a total of 29 farmers so far listed who have between them 361 sheep. And I could assure you that there are many more which we will eventually find once we have completed the work there. One of the problems we have encountered is that we need, first of all, to know how many sheep there are on the island. And you made reference to the amount of money that's allocated to this head. Unfortunately, last year we had requested funds for a census so that we would know exactly how many sheep we have and then how we can go forward. But that was cut from the estimates. So we were unable to do the census that was planned. But we have moved ahead, however, in doing what could be seen as an informal census, where we get out there and look for the farmers so that we can find how many we have. And so far we have identified 273 farmers who have black belly sheep. And we have a total of, so far, 10,701. And these numbers are changing every day because, obviously, at this time of the year, we have a lot of lambs being produced. And of these farmers, 11 of them have more than 100, and 60 have more than 25. So there's a substantial interest in the Barbados black belly sheep amongst farmers. And it is our intention now to move these farmers from just seeing themselves as people keeping sheep, but as people who can have a viable part of a black belly sheep industry. And this is one of the problems in getting farmers to understand that it is not only about keeping sheep. And I'm glad that you made mention of the utilization of the hides, because we have been told by the experts that the skins from the Barbados black belly sheep make extremely high quality leather. And I always tell people this is not leather for sandals and drums, but leather which is fabric quality leather, which in fact has a greater value than the value of the meat itself. So I quite agree with you that it's a very lucrative, potentially very lucrative area. What we're also doing is that we're embarking on having a rapid multiplication program where we can make sure that we have enough lambs to provide farmers and persons who want to get into rearing black belly sheep, that we can provide them with breeding stock. We also have, as part of the program, a feedlot, which will make it possible to, instead of having a sheep out there running around in the pasture all day and not being properly fed, where we can have animals kept indoors and fed. The best example I could give you is if you think of the poultry industry, what is done with chickens, where they have feed and water available to them continuously, and you can get them in 6 weeks. Now we would be able to have a lamb that can be slaughtered in 7 to 8 months rather than having it for over a year. And if 40 years ago someone had told our parents or grandparents that they have 5,000 chickens in one place, they would tell me they're crazy. I think the same thing applies now to sheep farming, where we use more modern techniques for animal husbandry, that we can rear these sheep now in an environment where we can have larger numbers with better quality meat and skins, and also having them available for the market at an earlier date. And this is something that has been proven other places. We see a farm in Trinidad, for example, that has 3,000 black belly sheep. And that farmer only has a total of 10 acres of land. So the technology and the methods are there, and I believe that with the correct approach, we can make the Barbados black belly sheep industry very successful and viable industry in Barbados. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. As it relates to the support to the Barbados Black Belly Sheep program, the Greenland Livestock Research Station is embarking on a number of activities that would support the work that is being done in that program, specifically as it relates to developing more offspring that would have the characteristics that we want to help the farmers to have a profitable industry. In the past, the challenge with Barbados Black Belly Sheep was that the size of the animal, the carcass is very small, and so the profitability was not there. And so we're embarking on a selective breeding program to focus on creating a set of animals and offspring that would be able to have good growth rates when you put them in a feedlot type of setting. So, for example, things that we need to address would be ensuring that we select ewes that are producing all twins and triplets, or quadruplets, for example, ensuring that they're good mothers and that they produce enough milk. So that would ensure that we have less lambs dying, because lamb mortality tends to be quite high. Additionally, we are selecting for rams. Obviously, bigger rams will produce bigger rams for slaughter, but also to ensure that the rams that we are producing for breeding will give more ewe offspring and not more rams. So the selective breeding program is a key part of it, because we want animals that are going to give us the kind of size. The Barbados Black Belly Sheep has phenomenal flavor, yes, but in terms of the meat to bone ratio, they tend to have a lot more bone and not enough meat, and that's where the profitability issue lies for farmers. So we have to address that. We also have, in our conversation with Guyana, and we spoke with a number of the veterinarians there, the head of the vet services department in Guyana, livestock and development services there, but also with Dr. Nicholas Waldron. And one of the things that he mentioned is because that the soils in Guyana are so wet, the animals will tend to suffer from foot rot disease. And so what they've been able to do successfully in Guyana is to breed the Barbados Black Belly Sheep with a sheep called the Texel. And this allows them to get a crossbreed, which would still be able to use the Barbados Black Belly Sheep label in terms of our marketing, but have a breed that would be suitable for the environment in Guyana, that would allow them then to generate the type of numbers that we're going to need to get to the million sheep that we want to do. So on the Barbados aspect of it, we are working on developing the characteristics for the pure lines of Barbados Black Belly Sheep here, and then in Guyana they'll be expanding, but it likely will be a crossbreed with the Barbados Black Belly Sheep and the Texel. Thank you.
Thank you. This is, I hope it's not seen as a challenging question, but based on the research and all that I've heard just now, we usually set targets, and we have that target of 1 million black belly sheep. I would like to know, if you can at this stage, probably not now, but if you can, give us an indication as to when you think you can achieve that target of the 1 million black belly sheep.
Thank you, Honourable Member. We are currently working in collaboration with Guyana and the Minister of Agriculture in Guyana and his team for us to determine how we are going to approach getting 1 million heads in 5 years as the target that was set by the Prime Minister. The paperwork that is being done on that would tell us exactly how we're going to target reaching that deadline. They are doing the numbers. They're also looking at the lands that they would allocate in order for us to be able to do a rapid expansion program. And the CAO already mentioned selective breeding, how we will look at rams that are going to be able to get us more ewes rather than rams. And all that technical work is currently being done in Guyana using the baseline of 5 years for us to reach 1 million heads.
Thank you. You answered the question. It's a 5-year period. My final question, I'm going to move away from the meat and the sheep, and I'm going to go to root crop production. This is, it is probably in the estimate, but years ago, I know you sat with me and we were two-thirds with respect to Barbados being self-sufficient in root crop production. And I'm going to ask the probing question: how far are you off from the target of being self-sufficient in root crop production?
Thank you, Honourable Member. The question is definitely a good one, given the fact that we are responsible for food security. Root crop production, as you might have heard previously, didn't come without challenges, be it sweet potato, be it cassava, be it yam. And we've been working with the Home Agriculture Station, with the FAO, to provide clean planting material for these crops. I think we do pretty well with sweet potato. We have had an increase in yam production last year, and we are also looking at how we can best grow cassava. The CAO will take you through the technical areas of it. Yesterday I had Mr. Michael James speak to the whole issue of clean planting material, and if necessary we can go over that again. But I would let the CAO explain where we are in terms of root crops and how we can increase their production.
Thank you so much, Minister. I think we are almost, I would say 100%, or close to 100% in terms of self-sufficiency in root crops. Typically, we have seen more than 98% production in Barbados for cassava, certainly for sweet potatoes. Yam production went up by 42% this year. In the past, we were at about 78% of yam production. Edibles is probably the only root crop that we are less than 50% in terms of production. And part of that is obviously the lower yield and the longer time that it takes to grow. I think what would be a better indicator of where it is that we need to go is how can we now encourage consumers to consume more root crops as the starch of choice, so that there can be even greater growth within the agricultural sector because they're consuming less imported starches such as rice or white potatoes. White potatoes is the largest fresh vegetable import in Barbados. So to make an inroad into that, we'd be talking about more than 3 million kilograms, I think it is, of white potatoes we import. So if we're able to start to do that import replacement now, and not just a case of just reducing the small amount of imports that we get from the OECS countries, but we start to look at how we can replace white potatoes with sweet potato, how we can replace white potato with cassava or with breadfruit. Those would be the things that we would now want to do, and again it would tie in with the nutritional security, because we are also looking at higher nutritional content in some instances with our root crops compared to things like white potatoes. So we are almost close to self-sufficient, but there is an opportunity to do greater import replacement for other types of starches that we import.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Michael West.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to the Honourable Minister and his team. I want to first comment on where the CAO just left off, specifically in terms of encouraging more Barbadians to consume more root crops. where is the ministry in encouraging value-added products as it pertains to the root crops? I think that is definitely an opportunity that the ministry could pursue in terms of encouraging more agrotech, and especially with the youth in this country. If you were to walk around in the supermarkets, you would see a lot of imported products. They call them paleo products, and a lot of the fitness crowd is into them. And they tend to be based on the low glycemic crops. Is there a plan to encourage more of that by the ministry?
Thank you, Honourable Member, for your question. We actually, the whole thrust behind what we are doing with working with stakeholders in order to achieve healthier diets relates to the fact that we must be able then to move to agro-processing in a big way. And that is the reason why we are looking to establish a food terminal. And that is the reason why we are also meeting next month with the Committee of the Parliamentary Fronts Against Hunger as well, because we definitely recognize that there's a need to engage people at the level where we can provide greater opportunities for agri-processing, and at the same time encourage people to be able to look at the glycemic charts on the packaging as well, and be able to choose healthier, wholesome foods. The ministry is definitely on board as the ministry responsible for nutritional security in making sure that we can move this along, and through the food terminal and the ability to use a packing system and a processing system, we should be able to get more people involved at that level. The CAO and her team, her technical team, have been looking at how we can bring along more people. Certainly she has had several conversations with me about the types of approaches we can use for processing and packaging, and I would hand over to her to inform you in terms of where we are going.
Thank you so much, Minister. As it relates to agro-processing of root crops and agro-processing in general, there are two things that we must note here. First of all, when we go into agro-processing, we typically tend to need varieties that can handle agro-processing. So while at a very small scale level, at a household level, you could take a product and agro-process it and sell it, if you're going to do it at a commercial level, you first have to ensure that you select the right varieties to be able to do so. So things like ensuring that the agro-processed varieties don't have a high water content, the types of acidity of the raw materials or of the fruit or the vegetable. Some of these are the viscosity, things like that. Once you start to agro-process it, will be impacted. So there's work ongoing in terms of looking at what are agro-processed varieties versus what are fresh market varieties. And then the other aspect of it is ensuring that we have enough economy of scale, because once we set up an agro-processing plant, you must have the throughput to be able to provide a lower cost item. If we're only doing 1 or 2 runs a week, it means that you set up a very expensive plant and you're not going to get the throughput to be able to supply. But also in terms of consumer demand, when it comes to retail purchasing, consumers want to ensure that you have, or they want to ensure that they can have their product consistently. So if we put the product on the market today and it's not available tomorrow, then that is going to create a challenge. So we also want to make sure that we have the growers and their capacity to be able to deliver on the quantities that are needed to ensure that that agro-processing facility and the consumer's demand is met. Otherwise, we can see then entrance from other agro-processed products from outside of Barbados taking over. Additionally, as it relates to agro-processing, there are some shorter or smaller term wins that we can look at. The fresh cut market is a huge market right now. It's over a $6 billion market in the USA. And consumers want more processed goods, but they still want it in a fresh form or close to a fresh form. So we have been working with the BADMC to look at how we could design some kind of facility that would be able to provide farmers with assistance in developing more fresh cut products to meet that market space, and at the same time address the health and wellness desire that is coming from consumers. Yes, we see consumers want to eat healthy, but especially when it comes to vegetables, the time for preparation is often too great. So if you can get things that are diced and cubed and pre-sliced, and salads that are pre-packed, and you can get 5 different salads for 5 different days, that would allow you to, and at a good price, that would allow you then to be able to meet your nutritional demands, and that ties in to the nutritional aspect of nutritional security, being able to provide people in a modern time with the types of foods that they need, but that are still very nutritious. Also, as it relates to low glycemic index foods, then we are also looking not only at vegetables but also at fruits. And the Barbados cherry, there is also avocado. We're looking at a golden apple. Those are key low glycemic fruits, and I know that work was already ongoing as it related to looking at the nutritional profile for sweet potatoes, and likewise we want to do more of that work of tropical fruits and tropical foods, and be able to share that with consumers so that they can be informed as to what it is that they're eating and what is the nutritional benefits of the foods that we have here. Thank you.
Thank you for that thorough response. I was particularly enthused by your presentation yesterday, Minister, specifically with the feed program. And as the representative of our urban constituency, when I canvass, and as the honorable member for the city of Bridgetown alluded to yesterday, there's lots of budding young farmers in these urban communities. And as you canvass the areas, you see people who have gardens in the back of their houses, they're raising chickens, they're doing a lot, and they're trying to lift themselves out of their economic circumstances. And I'm enthused by the feed program and its potential as it pertains to economic enfranchisement for the youth. Now, when I go through the areas, I do recommend that they contact the Ministry of Agriculture and try to get onto the feed program. But there's so many of these individuals that it'd be very difficult for me to accomplish this on my own. Is there a plan by the ministry to engage in community outreach so that we can get to these people who really are very interested in agriculture, and a lot of the young ones to see it as a way out?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Well, that is an easy one because we have already launched the project here, which is the Community Agriculture Response and Empowerment. And that program is designed to get into communities with people who want to be able to do gardens within their communities. The ministry, through the BADMC, and indeed with the support of the BAMC, will arrange to come to the area. We can help with the cultivation services, and then provide you with the implements so that the community, those who are involved with the community, can continue to do the work. Where necessary, we can help supply them with the drips and seedlings, and an extension officer would also be assigned to be able to come around and make sure they're following the guidelines that have been given to them. And if there's need for training, they can be trained under the feed program, similar to what we're doing at Lears. We intend to make sure that every community across Barbados, where there is an opportunity for persons in those communities to be able to do gardening and community type farming, we are supporting them. We've already started that project with some members of the community at Wakefield in St. John. The Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest is also doing a similar project, and we are working with him. I have pledged my support to make sure that he benefits from the support that the ministry is providing through the BADMC. And indeed, in your constituency where there are people and there are opportunities for people to do any form of community gardening or backyard farming, we will be willing to support them. The officer in charge at BADMC is Dr. Andrele, and Dr. Andrele is working with a team at the BADMC where they can come out and look to see what it is you have, and then we will determine how we will give you the support that is needed. I really and truly want to make sure that we don't miss anyone. Our mission here is to make sure that we can bring everyone along, and therefore I would want for the BADMC to provide clarity on how people can get involved in the feed program particularly, and also through the BADMC and the BAMC, how people can seek support for Project Here. There must be by now an opportunity for enrollment online into the feed program, and therefore I would want Dr. Andrele and CEO Acting Mr. Innes to provide for you and all honorable members and indeed the public of Barbados an opportunity to hear how people can easily and seamlessly sign up for the feed program for Project Here.
Thank you, Minister, and I look forward to working with you on that. Now, for my last question, as you're aware,
Remember, I was giving you to hear.
Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
From my colleagues.
Yes, Honourable Member. In terms of the access to the feed program and to care, what we have done is provide the access through our website. I will acknowledge that whilst the interactivity of the website is not yet at the scale we would wish, we're hoping to have a relaunch of our website in probably 4 to 6 weeks, which will allow for a more interactive application process and persons being able to submit directly. But in the interim, the access is there. There's a capacity to send the application to our officers directly via email, and we are accessible online. We also have a WhatsApp access available to persons such that they can reach out to us electronically in that form as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, I would wish for, if at all possible, for Mr. Innes to share the WhatsApp number and also the link for the website.
You may proceed.
Yes, sir. The website for the BADMC is www.badmc.org. The WhatsApp number, I will confess I do not have it readily to hand, but I will see if I could provide it within another 5 or so minutes whilst the member is still raising his next question.
Okay, thank you for that. For my final question, Minister, as you know, my father was a big agricultural importer, but he was also a top chef. And he would call me on days to acquire inputs to his latest creations. And he would always emphasize that the quality of the dish had a lot to do with the quality of the inputs. So he liked his food rich, so he would use a lot of tomatoes. So that would be factoring in heavily on his shopping list. So when I would get ready to send him the products, he would call and say, make sure that you do not send those imported tomatoes. I want local tomatoes, because the imported tomatoes taste like water. So the thing about the local tomatoes, they have a lot of flavor, and they make the dish really come out with that richness. Now, the issue with local tomatoes is, as good as they are, when the rain comes around, say about October, the yield tends to drop off tremendously, and you hardly have anything at all. What is the plan for the ministry to ensure that our top quality local tomatoes that could probably challenge even tomatoes on the French markets, that they are accessible to the Bajan public year round, so we don't have to rely on the watery tomatoes from overseas?
Honourable Member, I'll take that question. Tomatoes are a very interesting type of crop in Barbados because, as you rightly said, the yield drops off in the wet season. And actually, when you look at the import of tomatoes in the food import bill, what it doesn't tell you in terms of the total amount is that it's actually in those at that period of the year that we're importing tomatoes, and it's because that is a combination of it getting very hot, and the day and night temperatures are close, and so the flowers actually drop off. And so the answer for that, and which we do have a few varieties here that perform well, but it's also for us to do more work in sourcing more heat tolerant varieties. We know, for example, FA 3019 is a pretty reliable seed when it comes to being able to tolerate heat tolerant, or being more heat tolerant. We also seen a couple of plum varieties that were able to withstand the temperatures and what goes on in the wet part of the year. The other part of it, which we have seen farmers doing, and sometimes maybe they move away from, is the staking of the tomatoes, because once the tomatoes are close to the ground, that would also impact on the diseases, particularly bacterial blight would tend to be an issue, and there are other soil bacteria that cause some issues. So part of the program would be to provide more education or training to farmers through extension services to help them to understand or develop the skill to apply the right techniques and use the right types of varieties to be able to produce during that time of the year. But varietal testing on our agricultural station is going to be the key thing that will help farmers, because the more varieties we can test and provide to them the ones that are the most effective, that is where the biggest intervention is going to come, that would help them then to grow in that wet season. Also, as we continue to push and encourage them to use more mulch, it would reduce the impact of those same soil bacteria causing problems. So these are agronomic interventions in terms of helping farmers develop the skill and the capacity. There are a few growers who have become very proficient at it, but the intention is to develop more farmers who have that kind of skill to be able to do that in the wet season.
Thank you. I'm obliged to you, Chair.
Honourable Member for St. John.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Minister, let me start by thanking you for the extensive work that you and your ministry would have done in the constituency of St. John. If I may, Chair, I just want to single out Mr. Athley and Mr. Eversley for the work that was done at several plantations in the constituency of St. John. To name a few, Wakefield, Huttersall, I think Malvern is now on the cultivation as well. As you know, Minister, I have about 32 or so youngsters who are engaged in a project at the Wakefield, Project Phoenix, under the FEED program. And my question this evening revolves around training. Your chief would have mentioned in brief just now about the processing. And the fact that we have 32 youngsters that are farming at that particular location. We also have BAF that is on the cultivation as well. I am concerned and I'm interested in starting some processing in the constituency of St. John. I know that there will be a lot of work that will entail in terms of having a location, but I do have some existing buildings within the constituency that I believe can be pressed into a plant. My question is in relation to starting the process of training the value added to the agriculture that is happening in the constituency, because if not these youngsters who are directly involved in the process, then there are other unemployed individuals within the constituency that I can see this being a major plus. So I'm just wondering if training is something that can take place in lieu of finding a location and setting up a processing plant. In addition to that, Bath, to the north of the existing, or sorry, the former herb station that was there, there's some land, and I'm getting some requests in relation to sheep farming. So my two questions for you would be, one, the training for the understanding that at some point in time, processing could become a part of the landscape in the constituency, and what is the process in terms of sourcing land at Bath for sheep farming? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for your very valid question as it relates to looking at how we can do processing in St. John. I actually have a passion for St. John. It's a very scenic parish, and I would do anything possible to be able to assist with moving the residents or constituents in St. John along in agriculture. We would have to start work with Export Barbados so that we can look at how we are doing the processing. We create opportunities for us to be able to export some of what is being processed. I am prepared to get the BADMC to get on board to start a program where we can do training in agri-processing as well, and to add that to the feed program so that when you have farmers coming off the feed program, the BADMC is already required to take 40% of their produce. They still have to find market for the other 60%. We know that we agreed in Cabinet that government's procurement is supposed to take 60% of locally produced agricultural products, and therefore we would want to then be able to combine these and come up with a solution for processing for the constituents of St. John. I am happy to note that there are buildings available that can be pressed into operation, and we can continue a conversation to see how we can look at developing such a program. Bath, the land you mentioned at Bath, I would ask the BADMC to look into that because this can be a very tricky one. I recall when we were developing the feed program, by the earth station, my understanding, if I am not mistaken, is that land is privately owned, and we did seek to enter into an agreement to lease that land. We can go back there because livestock farming is already taking place there, and I have a number of other persons who have requested land at Bath to do livestock farming. We do need the mix because once we can get livestock farming with crop production, then we have natural fertilizers as well. So I would want the BADMC to respond to you in terms of the land for livestock farming, sheep, blackbelly sheep farming, and to speak to the land by the earth station.
Yes, good evening, Honourable Member. In regards to the land mentioned at the earth station, we were able to get some confirmation that they are privately owned lands, but we have, through the ministry, we'll be working to engage with the owners to see if there is scope to pursue these opportunities there. What we can say, however, is that we have at Bath identified some other areas where we are proposing to allocate towards the livestock maintenance. At this juncture, we are working towards having some of those lands cleared and identifying how we can move those forward. But at present, once we have those who are interested, we would work to at least start moving them forward as best we can in those ventures. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Honourable Member for St. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minister, I've been seeing a tremendous amount of activity along the Turners Hall area and some evidence of cultivation, certainly in the Rock Hall, Bardens area. And it's quite heartening to see an area that was pretty much bush transformed into agricultural land. My question, however, it has to do with the short-term and long-term plans for the development of that area, given the amount of activity that is now taking place down there. My second question has to do with the Highgates area. You made mention of a national orchard being established in that area. What I would like to know is what was the considerations that led or informed the establishment of this orchard, given the challenges we have had in the past in that area with different fruit types, and if any consideration was given to perhaps the introduction of cash crops in that area, and if there's a issue with fertility of the land, some form of crop rotation for that part of the Scotland district.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for your question. I want to give you the assurance that at some point I would want for my team at the BADMC and you to get together to discuss St. Andrew and the work that is being done in St. Andrew. I do know that we have farmers from the feed program who are being placed at Bardens. We are actually developing the water supply over there. And at Walker's as well, I know that there are some farmers over there who have been given assistance through the BADMC. The Highgates orchard, Highgates was known for many, many, many years for producing a wide variety of local fruit. And the Barbados, or the Bajan cherry as we refer to it, is one of those that we had in abundance at Highgates. What we are trying to do is to redevelop the orchard there. We do have the reservoir to be able to supply the water. I think when we started to recognize what climate change has been doing to agriculture in Barbados, a lot of the trees and the fruit trees that were part of the orchard, we started to lose them. There wasn't proper fencing, and so animals came and grazed down the trees as well. We are basically re-establishing the orchard there, but an orchard with a major difference. And I've asked the CAO to work with the team at Soil to be able to give us an orchard that is going to have a fair amount of appeal, including appeal to our tourists when they visit the area. I will ask the BADMC to respond to the questions about Walkers and Bardens, and then let the team, CAO, and if we have Soil here, to speak to you about the orchard at Highgates and how we are utilizing the lands at Highgates. But yes, there can be an intercropping sort of farming that can take place there, where you do trees and you do other things like legumes, etc. So we go to the BADMC and then come to the CAO to speak to you about the orchard that we are developing at Highgates.
Yes, good evening, Honourable Member again. In regards to, you mentioned Highgates, Turners Hall. As you indicated, we have started to place a number of farmers from the feed program into those areas. You mentioned short-term and long-term plans. What we have tried to do in those areas is to identify suitable crop systems that would not degrade the soils in the Scotland District area. So where possible, we've introduced such systems as apiculture, such that the beekeeping serves to improve the capacity of the plant growing in those areas. We've also tried as much as possible to introduce the fruit crop production, such that those lands and those trees can maintain the soils for those areas. Where we have done clearing, we've been very careful to work with the Scotland District Authority and the Soil Conservation Unit to identify those slopes that are under the recommended 15 degrees, so as not to create issues once we have rains in those areas. And the clearing has been done again with the Soil Conservation Unit on hand to ensure that we are not creating issues as we move forward. The other key element in terms of the long-term development, as we place those persons in those areas, the main focus is persons who are resident or are close to that area, so that they do have some vested interest in maintaining and developing those areas in an appropriate and adequate manner going forward. Thank you.
Honourable Member, as it relates to the plans for the area as well as the orchards, I'd like to first talk about the nature of the Scotland District. And remember that, or you should be aware that about 50% of the land in the Scotland District is actually sliding or slipping, and there's some kind of erosion going on that could be significant. And that's why we actually had set up the Scotland District Soil Conservation Act to protect that area. And yes, there's been a lot of agriculture that was done with it in the past. The concomitant side of that, especially when it is not done in a way that is sustainable, is that the budget of soil conservation then has to increase to then shore up the areas that are slipping and sliding, because we are clearing too much of the land and leaving it exposed, which is then leading to greater land slippage. So there is this balance that we have to find in the Scotland District. Now, as it relates to the Haggards Orchard, one of the things that is not often commonly known is that at Haggards, it was actually a research station for fruit trees. And this was the basis of a number of the orchard areas. Now, we are working on a design that would see all types of local fruit being grown in the Haggards Orchard, which will double as both an orchard for and a tourist attraction, but it would also be the source of the planting material, because soil conservation is very critical for providing fruit trees to farmers. And these are grafted fruit trees or budded fruit trees that typically will grow in a year or less. If you take a fruit tree or a seed and you plant it, or if you've done like my dad and you planted a lemon tree, it might take 15 years to bear. But when we do budding and grafting at soil conservation, you can get fruit trees starting to bear within as little as a year. So the orchard has also served as that source of material that we could replicate more plants and more fruit trees to be able to provide to the public. And in fact, we never have enough. And there's ongoing work that needs to be done to be able to supply more fruit trees. And we do supply a huge amount of fruit trees to the Million Tree Planting Program. So as it relates to the Haggards Orchard, we are developing that. And we want to ensure that there's enough fruit tree planting material, and particularly for the Scotland District area, where the planting of fruit trees, especially large trees, will be critical for stabilizing the land in that area, which would then allow for areas which are below the 20-degree slope, because areas higher than that 20-degree slope, you get more slippage in that area. So areas below that would then be ideal for vegetable and production and type of row crop production without destabilizing the lands in that area. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. And also thank you, I'm glad that it was raised that the engagement of residents with within that area, within close proximity of the Scotland district, will be engaged at some point. In fact, one of my questions would have centered around the medium used to engage persons within that space. I know you've mentioned your website, mentioned your WhatsApp number, but may I humbly suggest that perhaps another medium of communication is introduced, because most persons, and certainly the ones that I would have engaged with, are not familiar with the WhatsApp number, nor are they familiar with the ability to access the web page. So going forward, I would suggest perhaps another form of, PSA or some form of communication is used to reach those persons who may have the ability and they want to engage in this form of agriculture, this form, but are not aware of the process in which they can get involved. But as I said, I'm heartened by the development of that area, and I'm thankful for your clarity in explaining the rationale behind the establishment of the orchard. Thank you very much. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I would want to use this opportunity, Chair, at this point in time to allow the BADMC to go over the website information and at the same time share the WhatsApp number so that persons can reach the BADMC if they want to enroll in the feed program or need assistance for community gardening. And I wish to assure the Honourable Member for St. Andrew that I intend to allow for him to have a working relationship with the team at the BADMC.
You may proceed.
Yes, sir. In regards to the website, I'll just repeat again. It's badmc.org, and we can also be reached via WhatsApp, 826-0712. Our main number in the office is also an access point, and also through the Ministry of Agriculture, they are very happy to refer persons over to us and facilitate that contact. Thank you very much.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you very much for the privilege to be able to make my small contribution this evening. But at the outset, I'd like to highly commend the Honourable Minister and his team in the Ministry of Agriculture for the strides that they have made thus far to help to rekindle spirits in the area of agriculture. I know it's a massive ministry, and there are many critical areas for which it has that responsibility, and therefore I want to say how thankful I am, having seen their performance last year, particularly when we were doing the food packaging and so, to help those persons who were unable to get out and fend for themselves in the heart of COVID. And I think that that was highly commendable. I want, sir, to find out from the Honourable Minister and his team through you, sir, if the Ministry of Agriculture has synergies in place for working with our schools and our community development department, meaning the Ministry of Education. And of course, everybody knows that I like to go back to the past, because if we don't have that platform of what worked well for us as a people, then we cannot pass on those values, the mores, the activities, the skills, and whatever to our youth. And therefore, I've made that query because I can remember very, very vividly as a young child, and of course it happened across the length and breadth of Barbados, where all schools, whether they were primary or secondary or private schools, despite the limited or the vast amount of land that was available, they always had programs in agriculture to engage young people so that they can start to develop skills and to be able to grow foods, flowers, all forms and fashions of agriculture, to be able to become productive citizens. And of course, we all know that when that food was planted and reaped, those children were able to take home some. They were able to help, parents were able to get to cook more nutritious meals and so on. Now our schools are smaller, because I know when the primary school which I attended had 705 children, and the plant is no bigger today. It doesn't even have 200 children now. Our secondary schools were not as big when it came to numbers, but I am saddened to see that with all the space, and I believe, yes, there should be space for physical education. That too is an integral part of the health and the development of human beings. But I'm seeing all forms and fashions of things growing in the schools, all kinds of trees. And yes, we need trees, but I am not seeing the agricultural lots that will help to be the training ground for our children and our teachers and other parents, because parents are integral to the whole exercise, to come and assist the children to be able to work towards planting food and flowers and so on, to be able to enhance the environment, but also to grow the food that will help, that they will be able to do the eating. I want to indicate specifically, because I know now that Barbadians have become very particular, but the children played an integral part in the entire exercise, and they did not have tools like what we have today. They didn't have spades and so on. They probably had a hoe and a cutlass and a fork. But the children were intimately involved, even if they brought an additional pants or shirt, to be able to get involved in the exercise, because it develops an element of appreciation for agriculture from the very young in our society. And therefore, I want to find out what exactly, where are the synergies with the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Community Development, and indeed any other ministry, because if we are looking at the training ground and preparing our youth for the world of work and for the world of becoming productive and for the world of eating healthier, acknowledging that we say Barbados is the capital of amputations, I would wish to know, having looked at the wonderful objectives I saw and the strategic planning and so in the ministry, I'd like to find out what plans there are going forward, if they are not in place yet, to be able to determine how our children, our students at university, our students in the secondary schools, how they will be preparing for such. And I close on this one so that the distinguished members can answer me in relation to setting up programs, competitions, interactions with the students and other persons from the Ministry of Agriculture and others who will be in that field, and so that it can help to develop appetites, because once the children grow the foods, they get some things to take home that they can prepare creative meals as well, and put them on a path that they learn to appreciate locally grown foods and not all these fancy foods that we see coming in from overseas, and the fruits and so on, that we don't even know what they may be carrying in them, depending on how they were being grown and all that. So I would like to find out exactly what the situation is in this respect, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I'm indeed pleased, first of all, to receive on behalf of my team at the Ministry and within the SOEs your words of commendation. I'm one of the persons who believe that when people are encouraged and their work is acknowledged, that they are motivated to do more. And certainly hearing from you this evening will motivate the entire team to be able to do more. Honourable Member, I wish to assure you that the Ministry has already started to speak with the Ministry of Education to develop agriculture in the school system as well, and to further let you know that through the SJPI and the University of the West Indies and the TVET Council, the Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority, is also doing work to help students to be trained in CBQs and MBQs as well. The Chief Agriculture Officer has assured me that she has already started a conversation and I will let her bring you up to date with what is happening where that program is concerned.
Thank you, Minister. Working with youth is actually a big part of what the ministry is very keen on doing. And for two reasons. One, youth succession planning in the agricultural sector is going to be key to its sustainability. And so there have been a number of programs that the ministry has engaged in over the years working with youth. One of them, over 10 years ago, the ministry used to work specifically with the Ministry of Youth and Community Development for a Youth in Agriculture Schools program, along with the Junior Achievers. And the ministry's technical experts would assist a number of the primary schools with having and setting up their gardens. This would have been difficult to continue because of the limited technical expertise available to work with the schools. We are now looking to revamp that by creating an intermediary program, a Master Gardener program, in association with the BADMC, to develop persons to be Master Gardeners in the community. And if we can have Master Gardeners in every community associated with every school, then they can provide that technical expertise to help the school gardens to continue, and particularly then there's also the assistance that's needed to maintain the school gardens during the vacation period. And so we are looking at a set of programs to ensure that that keeps going, ensure that when school starts, the gardens are ready for the kids to plant in. And we started discussion, the new chief education officer, to Ramona Bradshaw Archer. She is so enthused and driven to have agriculture in every school program in Barbados. And so we have had some very robust discussions, and I'm certain that Minister Bradshaw would tell you that she wanted to start since October. Now, of course, schools have been out, but we are working on developing a program that would allow us to see the continuity as opposed to the starting and stopping, that would encourage that relationship between agriculture and education, and also agriculture and youth development. Likewise, the ministry had last year engaged with the Ministry of Youth and Community Development to discuss programs that we could work with and assist youth and communities. Of course, the minister would have indicated we have the Community Agricultural Response an empowerment program, which is targeting community gardening. Our Layers program is targeting allotment gardening, and we want to do the same thing at Pine Basin, which would then provide urban areas to have that facility for community gardening, and particularly for youth to engage in it, because agriculture is not only key in terms of providing food, but it provides a strong socioeconomic linkage. It makes a community stronger. It brings that togetherness to communities. It also is important for positive youth development and teaching them life skills. So we are acutely aware of that, and developing those programs and working with them will be key. The other thing that we're also doing in collaboration with the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation in Agriculture is their youth farm program, where young people are actually being trained in NVQs through the youth farm program. And every year we have this training taking place, and they actually are working on, and they do part of their module at the Greenland Livestock Research Station with livestock at the Home Agricultural Station. Our technical experts at the ministry often work with different, the SJPP as well as the BCC students, provide technical training. Sometimes they go in and they teach classes. So there are a number of connections there, but what it will require is to have stronger linkages and consistency to see this all the way through. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your explanations. And I had 4-H written down. I forgot to mention it, so I want to put in a plug for them. Excellent jams and jellies and so on they're doing. I also want, sir, to raise the whole issue of food security. And we're talking forever about minimizing the import bill, the food import bill. And having lived in the same space for so many years now, I am extremely concerned about what is happening in St. Thomas, an area that grew all kinds of crops. I have a very vivid memory because I did a lot of agriculture too, because that was a part of our lifestyle. Almost every household engaged in doing something with sugar cane, animals, vegetables, fruits, and so on. And I believe that it is a way that we should continue to go if we're talking about that theme that the late, I didn't ask you, sir, if I could use her name, but I'm sure that you would not mind. You will give me that permission. The late and then former Senator Carmita Fraser, who used to have that slogan, grow what you eat and eat what you grow. Our food comes first. And that was a part of it as well. And it's a wonderful statement that I see that the Ministry of Agriculture is producing many items with that, her name. But I want, sir, to find out from the Honourable Minister and his team what is happening in the parish of St. Thomas. I am seeing now plans that appear to me as though those who own the large tracts of land are keeping that land lying fallow for 25 and 30 years. I believe it's a plan, good arable land where the rain falls every day. It runs off into the sea and other places. But I believe that we need in St. Thomas, with those people who have the large tracts of land, to get back to agriculture. The trees are massive. There are tremendous challenges in the parish because of that land that is laying fallow, when there are so many small farmers who would love to get a quarter acre, a half of an acre of that land to do farming, to be able to help to feed themselves and to raise the funds to raise their families. And that is a grave concern of mine. And I would like to know exactly what is happening in that respect, where the Ministry of Agriculture, there is some farming going on, but that is the person, one of the families who owns the largest tracts of the land with the cows and sheep and horses and so, or they're growing grass to help to make the hay, so that is fine. But there's too much arable land that is out of production, and I would wish to encourage the Ministry of Agriculture and the teams with the government to be able to see how best we can get back agriculture in the parish. I am not going to ask anything on this occasion about the project at the Jukes Plantation, where those 30 acres of land were donated. I found the comments on the aspects of the project, and I believe that the Ministry of Education may be getting involved in it, and I would love to see a project of that nature and that caliber go forward, because there are many young people, despite what anybody says, who want to get engaged in agriculture. They would have done projects at the SJPI, they would have seen their parents doing it, but because they have no land, they are unable to pursue their dreams. And I believe that if those lands can be, an arrangement could be done with the Ministry of Agriculture, or whichever ministry for that matter, to be able to help persons to have access to the land, we will be able to minimize that heavy food import bill that every year we're hearing about, and some of those products are nowhere near where the ones that we have on the island, but it is easy for people to pick them up in the supermarket or wherever and to have access to them. So I would like to know what is happening in that area. And finally, on that one, on that question too, is there a plan for a food processing plant? I know I've listened to the calling programs. I hear farmers say, well, they had too many carrots and they put the bobcat, or not the bobcat, the tractor, and plow them back in the land, which is the most ridiculous thing. When we have district hospitals and school meals and other institutions that could use the cucumbers and the carrots and so, because they're in the glut. Is there any plan in the ministry for us to look towards a food processing plant? Because if we have so much food growing, we really need to know how we can preserve it, how we can can it, how we can package it, and so on, so that persons in Barbados can access, and of course the export component will be put in place. That is my second question, and the third one is a little shorter, but I'll wait your guidance on that, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. You said quite a bit. I will try to speak to the ones that fall within our remit. I am aware that the lands in St. Thomas are privately owned, with the exception of the space that has been carved out for the Jukes project. The Ministry of Education under the former minister was preparing to have that project up and started in January, but an event took place that changed the course of things. The ministry is still working through the Barbados Agriculture Credit Trust to make sure that that project gets going, and I can assure you that the Jukes project will be a reality. As far as the 4-H is concerned, I will let the Permanent Secretary respond to the support that is being given to the 4-H movement. And I want to give you the calm assurance, as a former Prime Minister of Barbados used to say, that we will be looking at synergies to see how we can work with the private landowners in St. Thomas to look at a project similar to Lear's, so that we can bring an agriculture project to St. Thomas. And once I give you that assurance, you can rest assured that it will be done. I just looked to my left and I told the CAO that given the passion with which you spoke about St. Thomas and the agricultural land that is there that is not in production, that we intend to get the ball rolling in trying to come up with a project similar to what we are doing at Lear's. So I would let the PS respond to the question about the 4-H movement, and I would ask you to be assured that we are going to investigate how we can use some of the land that is privately owned in St. Thomas to deliver our project.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable members of the House, my comment is going to be very brief, really. It is only to reassure the Honourable Member for St. Thomas that the Ministry takes the work of the 4-H very seriously, such that even in times when there's very limited fiscal space, we continue to ensure that we provide $200,000 in annual subvention for the 4-H movement. You would be aware that during the course of last year, we had to be very carefully rationalizing the use of the available resources, financial resources available to us. But one of the things that we made sure that we remain committed to was the provision of some type of financial assistance to the 4-H movement, as I said, to the tune of $200,000 annually. And I believe that we will continue to do so because of the benefits associated with the relationship that we have with the 4-H movement. Thanks.
No questions, sir? Can I go ahead, sir?
Yes, please.
Thank you. All right, this one is going to be touching because it affects almost every person in this island who plan to grow something. And it is to do with predator larceny. I want to know what are the future plans for reducing it across the island. I know that efforts have been made with all governments, but it is now, for me, getting worse. And it is not only fruits and vegetables, but it is livestock. And we are feeling it in the parish where I live. And for months, sir, I have witnessed people standing in the most dangerous parts of highways and corners and all over, selling sugar cane. They have never planted a cane plant yet, but they're all over, and Barbadians are buying it. I have no problem with that. I don't want to think anybody to think that I want to stymie the efforts of poor people, but I believe that honesty is the best policy. And when a person, whether it be a local planter or anybody who owns an agricultural lot or plantation, has to go cutting the canes when the crop season starts, and find that 20 rows are cut already from the interior. What messages are we sending? How do we expect people to continue when there's so much of a terrible loss? And therefore, I am saddened. I have 2 pear trees and some apple trees at the property where I rent for the campaign house. I have not been able to get a single avocado pear in the last 2 years, because as soon as you move away, people are picking all of them and they're selling them for a pretty penny. And therefore, I am concerned because the poor persons, in particular the little old ladies and old men and families who rely on those funds to help pay the same land tax bills, to purchase food, to settle other bills for utilities and so on. It really is heart-wrenching. And they're coming in the day and the night, and they do not care because they're driving vehicles, taxis pick them up. It is happening all in the village where I live, and I have my own spice, so I get to see what is happening. I would want to know what plans the government has, please, because I know that some farmers or some of the same persons who have the properties that are growing the food are going to get angry, and I really do not want any violence. I don't want anybody to be injured. I don't want anything of that to happen, but people are getting extremely upset, and every day in the community where I live, I hear it. I don't always see it unless I check the eyes and ears, the eyes that are around me to be able to determine what is happening. And I want to know, how are we going forward? Because if people are stealing more than you grow, or stealing most of what you grow, I should say, how then do you operate? If you were relying on those funds to help you with the project, to raise your children, and so on and so forth, how then can you maneuver? How then can you exist when they're carrying away 500 chickens, 5 heifers? I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it really is something that has me extremely concerned. And I'm sure that there are other thousands of Barbadians who are concerned about what is happening and probably think that they have no voice. Yes, we rely on the constabulary to be able to assist us in that respect. I don't want anybody to come up. One lady said she was going to put snares in her ground for the foot of the thieves. We don't want that either. We don't want anybody to get a firearm and shoot anybody. It is not the culture of Barbadians to be violent in that way, but sometimes when push comes to shove, people are forced to do negative things. So I want to know, how can the ministry, in its synergies with the police and with other people in the communities, how can we go forward to help to stymie this process of petty larceny that is causing hundreds of thousands of dollars to be taken away from those persons who are working day and night to be able to get the produce sold, that they too can get the funding to raise their families and to purchase whatever it is they so desire. Those are my comments. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Member, and I really and truly am in support of most of what you said in terms of prairie larceny. I can give you the assurance that we are working on the legislation that is going to deal with prairie larceny. On February the 3rd of this year, we met with the Commissioner of Police to look at the establishment of a prairie larceny unit within the Barbados Police Service. The Commissioner of Police assured us that there's already work going on with the Barbados Police Service and the Barbados Defense Force under the caption Bird's Eye, and they are working through the Barbados Police Force Tactical Unit. They have started work in January and December as well, and this work will be, unfortunately, we would all recognize that prairie larceny, just like any other criminal activity, we will put the legislation in place, but we're going to need a number of other things in order for us to be able to control this. The joint effort between the Barbados Police Service and the Barbados Defense Force is one. We certainly going to have to look at geofencing, because with geofencing, it sends off alarms so that farmers would know what is taking place on the farm. The issue of using drones as well. When we discussed this matter with the Commissioner of Police, he indicated that they were going to look at a special type of drone that is going to be able to give us facial recognition and those types of things as well. And that conversation, as I said, took place on February the 3rd, and we are to come back to look further at this. It is our wish that we can have a mixed of approaches to deal with prairie larceny. The FAO has already committed to providing us with the chips so that we can do a program in order for us to do a track and trace with animals. And then at farm gate, we are going to be working with farmers too, because farmers must play some role in all of this. And it certainly cannot be solely the responsibility of the government, because we have to have a collective approach in dealing with this. So at farm gate, you're going to have farmers would issue receipts or either manual receipts or electronic receipts, so that we can have a track and trace system as well. And once we put those things in place, let's say, for example, a person who is selling sugarcane at a corner or at a roundabout must be able to provide a receipt to show if they actually purchased the sugarcane, or if they have some proof that they grow it themselves. In order for us to be able to combat predator larceny in the way we intend to, is going to take collective effort on the part of the farmers, working through the ministry and using up the available systems that are available to us. You do know that the vending bill was recently passed, and that vending bill also provides for us to set up vending zones, and certainly a number of control mechanisms will also fall under what is being done with the vending bill. As it currently stands, I do recognize that there is a hue and cry over what is taking place with persons planting crops and not being able to reap them. It saddens me, to tell the honest truth. I am at the point where I feel that, you know, we can do a lot better. I recall someone going on a farm in broad daylight to harvest bananas as if it was their own. Put it in the back of a truck, making it look as though they're actually working on the farm. So we're going to need a number of things to put in place to make sure that we can control this. Similar to how we have to deal with crime, we have legislation in place where people are carried to court to deal with criminal matters, but you have to have some way of triggering or figuring out how to deal with crime in terms of intelligence, getting information to the Barbados Police Service, and also for get the quick response that is needed. So once we can combine those things with the legislation that is at the point of coming to Cabinet, once we can settle 2 items with the CPC, we will bring the legislation to Parliament shortly. It was my intention, and the team here can confess to this, they can confirm, that I had this targeted to come to Cabinet in October. And because of a number of things that came up then, we didn't manage to get it to Cabinet in October, but it's certainly going to come to Cabinet. And by the end of March, I would wish for us to be able to have it introduced into Parliament.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Thank you, Chair. I want to first of all commend the Minister for the serious approach he has taken towards implementing his mandate. And in true Bajan parlance, he is not monkeying around. And I want to locate my question today to deal with the Chlorceba sabia, the green monkey, which has been the proverbial albatross around the necks of farmers for decades. And I want to say from my ministry's perspective that we are signatory to CITES, which is the Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species. And Appendix 2, it speaks to the way how we trade in our wildlife and our species to ensure that the species population, the fauna, would not become endangered. We know for a fact that monkeys are used for biomedical purposes when they're exported. They are used to enhance zoos and parks around the world. And in Barbados, they are an important part of our ecosystems and our biodiverse management. They are the best food distributors in the world. And I want to say that against the backdrop that we also have a problem with controlling them as they have now become a domesticated pest. What is your ministry doing to balance this seemingly, as I referred to already, seemingly albatross, to ensure that the cries of the farmers could be heard and appeased, and they can have the quiet confidence that when they plant their product, they don't have to worry about not only what that predatory larceny from us human beings that the Member of Parliament for St. Thomas allude to, but the predatory larceny from the monkeys as well. So my question to you, Honourable Member, what is being done about the monkey situation in Barbados? Thank you.
Honourable Member, I thank you for your question. It's the most interesting question, simply because the responsibility for monkeys does not really lie with the Ministry of Agriculture solely, but it is a joint effort between the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Environment and National Beautification, since monkeys are part of our biodiversity. And therefore, for us to take action in terms of removing monkeys, we do need to seek the guidance from the Ministry of Environment and National Beautification, who is responsible for biodiversity. Having said that, my ministry and yours met, and we came up with some protocols to deal with the monkey population. I must say to you that people are saying we have thousands upon thousands of monkeys because they have now entered communities. But the last time we had a conversation about this, it wasn't as many as people are purporting to suggest. What it is that we need to put a control mechanism in communities. I am working with my farmers to make sure that we can assist them. We have established a relationship with the Wildlife Reserve, where there is a number, 535-5237. A WhatsApp message can be sent to the Wildlife Reserve, and they actually come to the area and they put down the traps to be able to capture the monkeys and take them to the Wildlife Reserve, because they use them at the Wildlife Reserve to first of all form a part of the population that they have in there, and then for research purposes as well. So we in agriculture have set up the hotline through for WhatsApp message, and I'm urging all Barbadians who have monkeys on farms to use this number or contact the ministry so that we can provide assistance where that is concerned. Monkeys entering communities and being a nuisance to people who are living there, it would take joint effort between the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Agriculture for us to be able to deal with that. And you may recall, Minister, that we looked at this, your ministry and mine, and we may need now to revisit it to target those areas where we're getting most complaints from, so that we can move in there and help capture the monkeys and reduce the concerns and fears of those Barbadians who have to be dealing with this monkey problem.
Thank you, Minister, for not only answering the question, but also recognizing that there is a gamut unequivocally between your ministry and mine as it relates to solving this problem. Minister, my second question relates to a fruit that seems to be missing in action for some time now, and that is the grapefruit tree in Barbados, an endemic fruit. Basically a hybrid between the shaddock and sweet orange, one which has significant medical purposes. You will probably hear before your foreparents speak about its use in asthma, to prevent the high cholesterol, reduce obesity, weight loss, you name it. I want to know what is your ministry doing to rehabilitate this important fruit. So once again, Barbados can enjoy the full benefits of it. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I first want to report to the Honourable House that I am about to receive a supply of clean seeds for grapefruit, which we are going to use in order for us to be able to have clean grapefruit plants in Barbados again. The ministry has been working with the problem that has been affecting fruit trees and citrus in general, the citrus green disease. And we've started to establish at Soil Conservation Unit a greenhouse for us to be able to do clean planting material over there. Citrus green is not a problem unique to Barbados, but it is a problem that certainly destroys citrus trees. And the Barbadian grapefruit happened to be one of those that suffered because of citrus green. The officer at the ministry in charge of plant pathology is Mr. Michael James, and I would want for him to elaborate more on what is being done to combat citrus green and how we can reestablish the grapefruit. But I can assure you that without a shadow of a doubt, I am receiving a new set of clean seeds for us to be able to reestablish the grapefruit in Barbados. James.
And lastly, Minister, my final question.
I'm waiting the response from Mr. Michael James.
Oh, sorry, my apologies.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable members, as the Minister alluded to it, citrus greening is a bacterial disease vectored by a small insect called a psyllid, and it is probably the most dangerous disease of all citrus throughout the world. In effect, has caused the removal of millions of trees throughout South America, especially Brazil. You have it in Jamaica, you have it in Belize, but all in all, there's no cure for it. So what has happened is that the ministry has taken what we have done basically is to follow the rules basically of how they're going to look at rehabilitating most of the citrus trees. And the minister rightly said it doesn't only affect grapefruit. So what we came up with is to basically use trees that have grown under greenhouse conditions, protected conditions, and then you use those to have, as the chief was saying, we're going to bud and graft trees in a protected environment. As I said, there is nothing you can do once you have the disease. However, what you can do, instead, when I say have the disease, you can't cure it, but what you can do is to alleviate it, and by improving nutrition of it. There are a lot of tests going on, as well as a lot of other things going on with respect to biotechnology and how you graft things like spinach, using the spinach gene inside of the trees to make sure that they have resistance to this particular problem. So these are all things that are being used internationally right now, but they're still in the infant stage. So what the ministry has done, the minister is talking about bringing in seeds, but these seeds will be planted under a protected environment so that they will not be exposed to the vector. Because once you're exposed to the vector, that is where you're going to get the disease. And once we have that, then you will have a package that we will also be doing so that when we give plants to farmers, they would have that package to follow. Because once you get out in the environs, you more or less likely to get the problem. But as I said, once you have the correct package in terms of the nutrition, there's some use of pesticides. I know that's a bad word for some people, but there's some use of pesticides, and we normally will use what we say are grass, generally regarded as safe chemicals. And there you have an even chance of getting back not only grapefruit, but we also have a reduction in number of limes that we are getting throughout Barbados, as well as lemons. So that is where we are going. And as the minister said, and the chief was saying, down at Soil Conservation, this is where we are going to be doing a lot of that work. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we will see an improvement not only in the grapefruit, but the other citrus that are growing in Barbados. Thank you.
And my final question to you, Minister, recognizing, of course, that Barbados is one of the 10th most water scarce countries in the world, and we are not idiosyncratic in our drought situation. What is being done in your ministry to ensure that our trees are able and our food security is realized, recognizing, of course, that we have this situation with drought and water shortage? So I really want to know, what are the mitigation plans of your ministry to ensure that we have water so that we will not be encountering these problems associated with drought and tree deaths?
Minister, I want to thank you for raising the question as it relates to drought, which really is a problem in Barbados right now. I've been seeing prolonged droughts and then rainfall patterns that we are not accustomed to. The ministry is certainly engaging.
Honourable Minister, you may want to go a bit closer to the mic. We are having a bit of challenge hearing you at the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Are you hearing me better now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so we have started a number of programs, and we've developed a water augmentation program that is seeking to bring relief for the farmers and to make sure that we have consistency in supply of water for the farms in Barbados. We are certainly working as well with Ambassador Clyde Maskell to look at a method through which we can provide rates to farmers at a far better rate than what they're paying for the use of BWA water. And what I want to do is to allow Mr. Glenn Marshall, the officer who is responsible for working with the BADMC on our water augmentation project, and he would give you details in terms of the plans for the consistency and supply of water to the farmers and how we plan to address the issues with droughts.
Good afternoon, honorable members. The Ministry of Agriculture, we've been tackling the, I don't want to say shortage,
Sir,
but we have...
Sir, before you move on, it is important that you introduce yourself for the records of the House. Thank you.
I'm Glenn Marshall. I'm Senior Agricultural Officer. Yes, we've been looking at how we can improve the water supply to the agricultural sector. And this we've been tackling on a number of different fronts. Already going on, and we're looking to expand that, would be the existing infrastructure we have with the BADMC. They have already been providing water to some 500 farmers. There are about 12 irrigation districts across the country, and that's been in existence for a long time now, so maintenance is key there to keep that functioning, to deliver that dedicated water to the farmers. In addition to that, we have been looking at some other areas, some other initiatives, and at this stage we are actually actively working on reservoirs, because yes, you can pump the water from the ground, and we have to use that together with the Barbados Water Authority, who will be providing potable water. So we're looking for other areas where we can capture the water, runoff water, storm water flow, if you wish. And we are actively looking at, right now, about 10 reservoirs, again, across the country. There are different stages. For example, at Haggett's in St. Andrew and at Brown's Pond in St. Philip, we have already started, and by the end of March, those reservoirs should be ready and able to accept runoff water, stream flow, etc., this rainy season coming. Beyond that, we also have plans at Lears. This would be a combination of private operators and the BADMC. And we're looking at a reservoir there, about 20 million gallons, to provide water to about 75 acres for crop production. Beyond that, we also have reservoirs we're looking at. We have quotations for, and in the process of preparing cabinet papers for, 3 houses, the factory yard. There are 3 houses in St. Philip, Crab Hill, and St. Lucie. The one in St. Lucie will be one of the biggest at about, we estimate about 70 million gallons right now. And then we have reservoirs in other phases where we are investigating to be more certain that when we build a reservoir at $10 million, $15 million, that at least on average you get that reservoir with sufficient water in it throughout the rainy season every year. So we're doing some studies of those areas, Chance Hall, Spring Hall in St. Lucie, Wakefield. We just got the okay to go ahead with a study at Walkers in St. Andrew, and we're also looking at Bath in St. Philip. So there are a number of areas where we are looking, Bath in St. John, forgive me. So we're looking at those in terms of reservoirs, for stormwater drainage, any flow from, for example, the 3 houses stream in St. Philip. We're looking at that for increased storage capacity. And beyond that, we've been in discussion with the Barbados Water Authority with the use of effluent from the treatment plants. They're looking to rehabilitate these plants, the South Coast sewage system, the Bridgetown sewage system. And in rehabilitating or even expanding the one, for example, in Bridgetown, what do you do with the water that is now treated to international standards for discharge to the ocean? We have been in discussion with them to bring that water, treat it to a higher level, acceptable to agriculture, acceptable to the Ministry of Health. There's a standing committee, if you wish, a standing committee that's been looking at this water quality standards for that water that we're looking to bring back from the treatment plants to agriculture in Parish and St. Philip, Christchurch, St. George, and maybe beyond that. But they are the stages now, reservoirs, significantly large reservoirs, and also using treated effluent, which will be significant for the agriculture sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. George North.
Thank you, Chair. Much of what I had hoped to ask has been asked and answered earlier when we had the intervention by the Honourable Member for St. Thomas. But the question that I have further relates to the allotment program at Lears. We've been hearing much reference to this program. However, this is now for some 2 years at least, and there is concern that a number of persons who would have expressed interest in participating in the program have not heard back and would be unaware concerning exactly where we are with a start date to that program. And if, in fact, the program has started, then what are we doing about communicating to applicants regarding the status of applications? And it not only relates to the Lears program, but as it relates to the feed program, feedback coming in is that there are applications being sent in and for months. Individuals can't hear back concerning their expressed interest in participating. I'm also heartened to hear that just a few days ago, the feed program has rolled out in the constituency I reside in, and not the constituency I represent. And I hope that that means good news for the people of St. George North, that it is coming closer to them, hearing that it has rolled out in St. John. But I want to ask, well, I won't ask the question I had planned since it has been raised, but I would want to rest there on feed. And then the only other aspect that I would want the minister to comment on is the whole issue of coverage. When we go around to a number of the fields, agricultural lands under the BAMC and so on, we have the issue of coverage presenting itself. Wearing another hat, I know that there are allowances associated with managing coverage. And I want to have that question addressed here, and perhaps is one that must be considered and answered in tandem with the Ministry of Environment. What are we doing to eradicate the issue of coverage in government-owned lands or on government-owned lands that is causing a lot of distress, not only to workers on those lands, but to individuals living in the environs? Those will be my questions.
Thank you, Honourable Member. First of all, let me deal with the LEARS project. We are about to launch the LEARS project. The company that is doing the reservoir has been having some challenges in getting the work permits for the persons who are coming in to do the lining. And we have the assurance, like Mr. Marshall just said, that by the end of March, we should have the reservoir there lined. When I last spoke to the CEO acting at BADMC, he assured me that there's land that is available where we can do a soft launch, and we are putting that together. The LEARS...
You're still having some difficulty hearing you. Could you speak a bit louder?
Don't know why you're not hearing me. The LEARS project was approved in Cabinet last year. We went through all of the planning stages, all of the arrangements were put in place. We had to do a hefty bit of negotiating before we can get it to where the Cabinet would accept to agree on what was being presented. And now we are ready to roll out. There are elements to LEARS that we had to get right. First of all, you don't want to put farmers at LEARS and then they don't have water. And given the prolonged droughts that we're having, that area cannot be treated as an area for rain-fed agriculture, so we had to get it right. There's some land that is available, and as I said, we are going to do a soft launch at LEARS, which would engage the MPs in the St. Michael area, St. George, and indeed the representative for the area. And once we've done the launch, then we will start to see allocations going for all the others as we start the sugarcane harvest, because some of the land has sugarcane, and we need to start the sugarcane harvest in order for us to be able to make the lands available to the participants who will be at LEARS. I'm going to address the coverage issue, and I'm going to ask Mr. Apley to speak to it as well, because there are a number of things that we have discussed and put in place to mitigate against coverage on farms. So I want to have a very frank conversation about it. But before I do so, I'm going to ask Mr. Innes to further update you on where we are with LEARS, and then I'll come back to speak to the coverage.
Hi, good evening, Honourable Member. In regards to LEARS, the lining of that pond is due to happen immediately on conclusion of the lining of the river catchment at Browns Pond. The timing that we have been provided by the private contractor is, as I think it was indicated, the end of March for the conclusion of most of that work. there would be some other infrastructure works that the private contractor would be engaging in relation to the irrigation. However, the minister mentioned that once we are able to move forward on the available space, we would be seeking to have some of the initial applicants placed on those lands in the form of a soft launch and facilitating them onto the lands in the very near term. The actual progression of work will likely continue through June with the laying of irrigation pipe and the completion of a treatment plant that is also being scheduled and built at that location that we are assured is en route. So once it is in place and on island, they will be working to complete these works in time for the first rains we would expect in the rainy season. Thank you.
As it relates to the Cowitch, when I first became minister, I met with the private farmers and I met with the BAMC. And we looked at the challenges that are confronting the sugar industry, particularly because I wanted to make sure that we bring the solutions to what was happening to the sugar industry. I discovered that the private farmers weren't being paid on time, and there was a substantial amount of money that was due to them. Because of that, they weren't able to engage in good husbandry. So you find that a lot of the farms, yes, they were growing sugarcane, but the maintenance programs were not in place, and so therefore a lot of the farms had cowitch. My view on it was that this was not the way to do farming. It certainly was not good for us to have cowitch in cane fields that were going to be harvested where people were driving through with harvesters. And then those canes were going to be taken to Portville factory to be dumped into a house, to dump and spread the same cowitch right across the factory. Therefore, we then determined at the ministry that having listened to the farmers, we were going to make sure that we chase up the Ministry of Finance to bring the payments current. And under the program, we had an obligation to make sure that we bring all of the payments that were outstanding to the farmers current where they fell within the ambit of that program. Having done so, the farmers continued to receive their payments on time. And therefore, we assured them that once we are paying them on time and have been doing so, we expected in return that those farms will be rid of cowitch and that a program should be put in place so that the farms will go back to good husbandry and that there will be a management program in place for cowitch. Some got it fairly good, many others didn't. There are many farms that still have cowitch, and we are working to make sure that we get rid of it. On the BAMC farms, I've told the former chairman of the BAMC and indeed the current CEO that at all farm managers at BAMC must go through an appraisal system so we can track their performance and track how they manage the farms so that we will then be able to determine who's working and who's not working. Now, cowitch may grow on a farm, but it certainly can be controlled and dealt with before it starts to blossom and before it starts to put out its pods. And therefore, all farm managers under BAMC are responsible for making sure that they deal with the cowitch problem. Many of them may want to say that they don't have the equipment. The BAMC just received equipment. Yes, the equipment was slow in getting here, but they are receiving equipment. And I expect that we should be able to manage this problem at the level of the BAMC for as long as the BAMC is in the present form that it is, because we are indeed going to do a restructuring as well. And at the private farm level, I am also going to make sure that if we are paying them on time, then they have a responsibility to make sure that they get rid of the cowitch on those farms as well. Mr. Atterley is the CEO of BAMC. I really want him to speak to this matter because I deem it a matter that we have to take as seriously as we possibly can. and that we must do everything possible to make sure that we rid the farms of cowych. I personally don't like to see it. I drive around many of the farms. I grew up in Cliffden, which is near Church Village, but closer to Guinea Plantation. And I would have spent a lot of my time traversing Guinea Plantation for various reasons. And I drove through that area by myself because I didn't want anybody to lead me anywhere they feel they can lead me so that I would not see what I wanted to see. And when I drove through there, the area had more cowych than one can tolerate. And I drew it to the attention of the CEO and was given the assurance that the manager of the farm will deal with it. Now, I personally believe that as minister, when I go around and I see these things happening and have to draw them to the attention of management, that it would mean that if I didn't go, it probably wouldn't get dealt with. But I want to assure you and all honorable members that we are dealing with the cowych problem. We are putting systems in place to hold managers accountable, but we also equally have to be fair and provide them with the equipment to be able to deal with it.
Sorry, thank you, Minister. Honorable members, Chairman, as the Minister pointed out, and to shed a bit of clarity on the whole issue of cowych. Cowych is a weed control issue. It's a weed, and obviously, if you do not have effective systems in place, it will get out of hand. It is also a weed that even if you take it and you burn it, the seed still remain dormant, and it can grow back wherever it finds a home. The challenge we've had, and as the Minister pointed out, the BMC, and not only BMC, but the private farmers over the years have suffered from lack of payment on time, have suffered from lack of investment in equipment, which we have started to do over the last 2 years. And the other challenge that you would find that would allow the cowych population to increase at a fairly phenomenal rate, because it's a weed, is if the quality of cane that we are planting is not canopying on time. So ratoon stunting has been a big challenge in the sugar cane, being able to canopy at a rate that will close out and reduce the incidence of cowych. But what we have done at BAMC over the last 2 years, and I know what the privates are doing as well, is that for our strategy has hinted around the focus on the plant cane, which is planting of new cane cultivations of grounds and making sure that we now are able to acquire the appropriate herbicides to make sure that we address cultivation on a timely basis, allow us therefore to hit the weeds when they start to grow after the and then the second cut. When we do over a period of time to reduce the incidence of cowych. Now, it would be wrong of me to sit here and to explain or to try to justify the fact that we will get rid of cowych in the next year. But the focus has been to reduce the incidence of cowych and therefore to reduce the long-term impact. And as I pointed out yesterday, and I will say again today, one of the key things for us is to make sure that we are using clean planting material across the industry, making sure that the equipment that we're now able to deploy, we are doing a lot more spring tinding. Be familiar with agriculture, is really just going through the middle of the beds and pulling up the weeds with a piece of equipment. And obviously making sure that during the growth period, when it is green, that the workers are therefore placed in the field. Now you would appreciate that this can be done for plant cane, where the cane is probably about 2 or 3 feet. But when you reach the point of ratoons, which is fairly tall, you still get some incidences of cowych. On the outskirts of the ratoon canes, we make sure that we pick the cowych when it is green, but I would also want to remind members that this is an issue that needs to be addressed over a period of time, and it's a matter that BMC and I know as well the privates are addressing. In relation to the safety of the workers, because that is fundamental to us, we're making sure that we are providing the proper PPE, both in terms of on the farms, making sure that the workers are safe. What we've also done to improve the safety of the workers in dealing with coverage is that we've now moved away, and I know the privates in conversations with them has moved away from buying open cab tractors to actually buying enclosed tractors with the appropriate filters that can reduce the incidence of coverage. So I want to assure, certainly as the minister pointed out, it's a challenge, it's a problem we're working on, but we're also conscious that as we continue to restructure the industry, that it will take a period of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for the City of Bridgetown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I enter my questions again today to the Honourable Member for St. Philip South, Minister of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security. Yesterday I was querying the initiatives to assist with urban farming and was given a satisfactory answer in relation to the LAIRS project. I wanted to come with a follow-up, and I will do so this evening. As I was reflecting and was approached by a number of constituents again on the issue is not just to have land available elsewhere. I am appreciative of that, just like that they are. But their concerns go beyond that. They're looking at, in the event of a natural or man-made disaster, that they are able to still feed themselves, particularly in the short to medium term, by having initiatives or having programs where they can engage in a meaningful way in vertical gardening, rooftop farming, backyard urban gardening, and those types of initiatives. I remember as I made my way across the city, observing and admiring some projects in London-born Towers where some residents were able to construct some very, very creative ways of using minimal space for maximum farming. So my question is to the Ministry of Agriculture, what initiatives can we think of, and what is the position of the ministry on enhancing and expanding initiatives in urban Barbados to allow our urban residents to be able to feed themselves?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I think what I would want to do is to invite you to go with me to St. Michael Northwest so that I can bear what we've been doing to assist the residents of the St. Michael area in terms of how we have dealt with it on the project here. The ministry, through the BADMC, is willing to come to any area in the city of Bridgetown where there's an opportunity for us to look at how we can do the community gardening, or indeed look at any other creative solution using technology. We are getting to the point where, through a recommendation that I gave, where we should look also at deploying some freight farms in places like the city. London-born is one of the areas. And I'm prepared to come to the area and look at how we can set up a facility if you so desire. But what we are doing is helping through Project Here to give the implements, the seedlings, and to prepare land if land needs to be prepared, and to get those community projects going under Project Here. And Project Here, Community Agriculture Response and Empowerment is where we are going with this. I visited on 2 occasions the St. Michael Northwest area, and I've asked the BADMC to make sure that the extension officers visit there as well. And we are going to follow up to make sure that they are getting the support that they have asked for, provide them with the implements as well, and to provide them with the technical support also to make sure that there's success, because it is wanting to provide irrigation systems, provide seedlings, etc. But if the persons who are doing the farming don't get the technical support, you may not get the success out of the effort as well. The community gardening or kitchen garden projects that we are doing, I want to replicate them all over Barbados. That is the reason why we have the one in St. John as well at Wakefield. And to all honorable members right across Barbados, I am looking to make sure that we can get Barbadians back into kitchen gardens, because you rightfully pointed out, we don't know what might happen. There are several things going on right now, including challenges with logistics and supply chain, and therefore getting kitchen gardens and community gardening going is the initiative that we have used to be able to get food to those Barbadians who are willing to plant up the kitchen gardens and plant up the community farms.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I want to thank you for that, and thank you for letting me know that Project CARE will be coming to the city in a few weeks. I would have a word with the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest, because he's holding out on me, but we'll talk in another place. The second question, Minister, is in relation to the indiscriminate use of chemicals such as Ramoxone and so on. And I have a number of persons, myself included, because I'm not asking for a frame, but myself included, in relation to some of these chemicals that are now banned in a number of jurisdictions. We have a number of residents complaining that they have to not only close their windows and close their doors, but they have to use towels to kind of secure their homes from these chemicals. So I have a number of persons, again, including myself, would like to know what the Ministry of Agriculture have on these concerns.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Ministry launched a program in dealing with pesticides management, and in August of last year, we made sure that we engaged farmers to teach them how to, first of all, get involved in the proper disposal of pesticide containers. And there's a management scheme in place so that farmers don't just willy-nilly throw away containers or use pesticides indiscriminately. There are protocols that we have in place, and we've been working with the farmers to make sure that they're following those protocols. August 11th and August the 25th, respectively, we did two launches, one in St. Philip and one in St. Lucie. The use of pesticides in the city, though, is something that I would need further information on, because I would want to know where the locations are in terms of pesticides affecting people there. If you're speaking generally about the wide use of pesticides, as I indicated, there is the program that is in place, and we are updating the pesticides legislation as well to make sure that we hold people accountable. There is a program that the department and the ministry is working on where pesticides will not be sold to anybody who walked into a garden shop or hardware store to purchase it, but that they must be purchasing it against some form of identification that they're actually using it for farming. I have said before that things like spraying your backyard and those kind of things should be a thing of the past, because many people use pesticides and don't even know what they're getting into. And I had a former chief agricultural officer who used to always say to me when this came up, a fart and a whore is a good form of exercise and people need to get back to it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Minister. Honourable Minister, my final question for now, for agriculture, is in relation to the sugar industry moving to a sugar cane industry. We heard about taking the industry from just one product of sugar and looking at things like the biogas, molasses, energy, all the various things. I know we recently had a project with the colloquial name Mare Mossy, better known as River Tambring. We were planting, because of the calorific value and the nitrogen in this particular plant, to be able to get some energy. We had a lot of talk around that and so on, but I haven't heard anything about it recently, and I would like to get some more information on where the Ministry of Agriculture is going in relation from the sugar industry to the sugar cane industry.
Thank you, Honourable Member. A lot of the work in terms of transitioning the industry to a sugarcane industry has already begun. There are currently negotiations going on in terms of where we're going to transition. You would have heard the Prime Minister say over and over and over and over that the government would no longer be continuing in this space, and that this is a space for the private sector, and this is exactly where we are going with it. It will be a value chain industry where we are going from sugarcane straight through the whole value chain, producing sugar for domestic consumption, packaged sugar for export, molasses for the rum industry, and also doing the biomass at the factory and producing energy. So currently we are at the stage where the private farmers and the BAMC are finalizing the arrangements to do the transitioning, and this transitioning would take place certainly by the end of this sugar harvest. The BAMC and the private farmers will be in an arrangement where we will no longer seeing government providing the large types of subsidies that they're providing to the current arrangement that is in place, but that the private will be involved and that there will be an investment in the industry that is suitable for moving it forward with using renewable energy as a revenue earning source.
Thank you, Honourable Member, and I would like for you and your team to continue the great work and the energy that I spoke about yesterday as you go from strength to strength. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Philip West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, as this is my first time speaking in this honorable chamber, I would wish to thank the people of St. Philip West who saw it fit to elect me to represent them in this honorable house. And I simply wish at this time to say to the Minister of Agriculture and his team that I am grateful for the work that they continue to do that will benefit the people of Barbados generally and certainly the people of St. Philip West. Now, part of that work that you have been doing has included your encouraging more people, whether it has been students, whether it has been people at the community level, whether it is people in groups, to get more involved in food production and even to get into the further processing of food, not only for local consumption, but even for export. And my question is, what is being done to help these new entrants to food production and to the processing of food? What is being done to ensure that our food is safe for our consumers and that the food quality is indeed suitable even for us to sell abroad? That is my first question. My second question, Minister, speaks to the significant work that your ministry and your team has been doing along with urban development as it relates to providing facilities, the right kinds of facilities and markets for persons who are seeking to work in these areas. And my question to you is, I know that you had started some redevelopment projects in Barbados. I know that there's some that you're seeking to do elsewhere, and I wanted to find out what is happening with regards to market improvement, even in the urban areas such as St. Philip, as well as the work that you're doing in the other parts of Barbados at this time.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Your question, first of all, on food quality and food safety is one that I will defer to Dr. Beverly Wood, who is currently working with the stakeholders across Barbados. We just met recently with the Barbados Chamber of Commerce. We are to also meet with the Ministry of Health and Wellness so that we can bring the food safety legislation to Cabinet and then to Parliament. The CPC has already done a lot of the work on it. Most of the protocols that are involved, as I explained yesterday and Dr. Wood explained, we are currently using. So in terms of the fish markets and all the rest of it, most of the protocols are already employed. It is for us to anchor the legislation and establish the single unit that is required for us to be able to have a full management system with the manuals and all the rest of it that will speak to the standards that are required. But in terms of food safety, those protocols are already in place through the Ministry of Health. Those protocols are being used. A lot of the protocols have been implemented at the fish markets as well. And I would let Dr. Wood speak further to that. And then I will come back and speak to the markets and the plans that we have for market improvements.
Thank you, Minister, and good evening to members of Parliament. As we were speaking yesterday about the Food Safety and Quality Bill, under the current dispensation with respect to food safety, the Ministry of Health, under the Health Services Act, there is the food safety regulations, and there are also regulations which speak to procedures at restaurants and other places. The legislation that we have currently is dated, and it speaks to not to a preventative approach, but really and truly to, if they go in their normal procedure and see something that is wrong, they will ask that a corrective action is taken. The current approach to food safety is to have preventative measures in place, and therefore the legislation has to be updated to be able to address that. So persons who are into production, etc., will have to have plans in place to show where hazards can occur along their production lines, and to be able to put mitigating measures in place, and also to have programs that will show that those mitigating measures are actually working. Let's say that you are making a particular product and you have along the production line, when you sanitize it, you can take swab, you can say, well, okay, in this particular area, I expect that there will be contamination, and therefore when I use a sanitizer to sanitize that area and I take swabs, I need to show that it is being effective. So the current legislation that we are working on is to be able to move from a response approach to food safety to a preventative approach to food safety. And the legislation does not make persons to have some of these plans mandatory, and therefore, although a number of the manufacturers now do have it in place, they also have the law now will require them to actually have it and to be able to be seen by the Ministry of Health or the competent authority when we talk of a food safety agency to be able to address that. Currently, too, with respect to the safety of food currently, a lot of persons, entrepreneurs, are making pepper sauces, juices, etc. And according to the Barbados Standards Institution, if they want to put their product on the market, they have to have a label. And to be able to say what percentage of stuff is in there, whether there are no microbiological pathogens, persons come to the government analytical services to have testing done. So there is the facility for that. At the veterinary services, there are a number of programs looking at veterinary drug residues in selected products, and the government analytical services is also moving towards having capability to test for such things. So there is the microbe analysis, whether you're looking at the quality of the water that you're using in your production plant. We also have programs with the fisheries, where at the Bridgetown Fishing Complex, the ice and water that are used there and some of the sanitation practices, they bring swabs. Those are currently being tested. As we move further with respect to the fisheries program, there will be systems or documentation of programs to be able to assist that. So within the Agriculture, Health and Food Control Program and the foods, as it relates to food safety and quality, the legislation, when it is passed, will make mandatory a number of things, and then we have to work towards regulations where we will set what the standards that the food product must adhere to be placed on the marketplace, and also to be able to facilitate the export of the products from Barbados to our trading partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wood. Honorable Member, you also mentioned markets and improvements in markets. First of all, I'm pleased to report that at Fairchild Street, the work has been almost complete at phase 1, and vendors have moved into the stalls at Fairchild Street. Phase 2 of the project is due to start next month, and once phase 2 is started, the fruit and vegetable vendors will be able to move back over to that area. Currently, they are located in Fairchild Street, but on the other side of the market, closer to where the car garage and the Starcom network is located. At Eagle Hall, the cabinet agreed to a program of refurbishment at Eagle Hall, and once we can get that project going, we will refurbish the Eagle Hall market to bringing it in line with what is required for a market that is suitable for people who want to do vending, but at the same time can attract people who are passing along the way. So it's going to have an open feel, and it will have the aesthetics that would allow for the vendors to be there without being interrupted, as they currently are, by the birds who come in, or when it rains that they have a problem. At Spikestown, in this and the coming year's estimates in this appropriation bill, we've been able to secure funding in this appropriation to be able to refurbish the stalls at Spikestown, bring in a live Spikestown, and making sure that the vendors over there have proper facilities as well. And we've done a comprehensive paper to redevelop 6 roads, where we are putting in some work and refurbishing 6 roads and making sure 6 roads become a hub for people who are residing in all of St. Philip, Christchurch, St. John, St. George, and some of the funding has already been allocated in this appropriation, but we would also need additional work done there, and we are prepared to do the work and submit to be able to get the assistance to finalize what we are doing at 6 roads. I want to state at this point that 6 roads is a hub where people from all over St. Philip are going to either get involved in vending, or at the same time going there as a place to do business. And therefore, what we are doing at 6 roads is to do an expansion so that more people can have access to stalls there to do vending, whilst at the same time provide an opportunity for economic development in 6 roads. At Glebe and St. George, we are also refurbishing the roof at the Glebe and St. George, because what happened there is that a lot of the spaces were being impacted when it rained because the roof was leaking, and we are moving ahead with the repairs at the Glebe to make sure that we can put more people at the glebe by refurbishing the roof and bringing back a lot of the stalls that were out of operation back into operation.
Well, thank you very much, Minister. I'm very pleased to hear what is happening at 6 Roads especially, and also what is happening around the rest of Barbados. Now, you have shared with us, the first question as to how we're keeping the food safe, and you also have shared with me how we are making sure that the facilities where the vendors will be selling various foods, how you are also seeking to improve those areas. My final question is, how is your ministry working to educate Barbadians on what they need to be doing as vendors who are in the food space, as well as those of us who are consumers, so that we understand what we ought to be looking for and what we should be entitled to when we go to these spaces to be able to access the produce being offered?
Honourable Member, thank you for your question. I think that's an extremely good question. Recently at Cabinet, we discussed the idea of putting a program in place to train vendors, because many times you have people who are vending, but they have not had the requisite training in managing a business. So you would find that, say, for example, food portions are sometimes, when they're not too small, they're too large. Many times the vendors may lose money because they don't understand really the techniques in making sure that they can get maximum out of the product. And we are putting systems in place to train those vendors in business and train them working through with the hospitality sector, as was recommended, to make sure they understand also a presentation, and to make sure that when they present a package or they're doing food and beverage, that they're getting maximum from it, whilst at the same time providing quality. So a training program will be rolled out for them, and then at the same time what we are going to do is make sure that we can facilitate more people in the vending space by providing access to more market spaces where vendors can use vending as a way of life and a source of revenue.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to congratulate the Honourable Member for St. Philip South for the excellent work that the ministry is doing. I'm really very excited about their program. I see it as something that is going to revolutionize Barbados. There are just two areas that I want to have some greater clarity on and to make a suggestion for. One was mentioned by the Honourable Member for St. Thomas when she spoke about, yes, if we're growing the food and trying to make it available to help us with the NCDs, what are we doing in terms of getting people to want to use them, to eat them? Because we have a population whose taste buds are really educated away from our ground provisions and vegetables which we produce. So a program would definitely be needed for that. The question I want to ask, I think Carmitas, which has been the distribution arm where the ministry has been pioneering on making the different flours and different agro-processed products. I want to know if more work is going to be done in that area, and if they're going to pull in food technologists to be able to use or yam or cassava and other vegetables and root crops to be able to make foods, whether for snacks that our children then can shift from chiwis to something a little more nutritious, And if we can develop foods that we can have semi-prepared, that make it easy, which makes it easy for the homeowner to pick up in a supermarket and quickly use, so that we find creative ways of making those local vegetables and root crops available in tasty forms that we can use domestically, and should it take off, to help us to be able to move it across the region and into the hotels and further abroad. So that's my first question. If there are plans for doing work with food technologists to convert these foods we're growing into further processed products for consumption and for health.
Honourable Member, I thank you for your question. The Carmitas brand is one that is being managed at the BADMC, and I have Mr. Innes.
Sorry, we're not hearing you well. If you could just
the Carmitas brand is being managed at BADMC, as I was saying, and I'm going to let Mr. Innes speak to you in terms of what is being done, the products that they're producing there, the transitioning to healthier eating, because under the ministry we have already started the initiative to bring people along with healthy eating habits. And I would then, after Mr. Innes, let the CAO explain to you the number of initiatives that we have in place to sensitize people into the healthy eating programs that are available.
Good evening, Honourable Member. Thank you, Minister. In relation to the Carmitas brand, I think most members would be aware that we are producing both the cassava flour and also breadfruit flour. We also have, I think, would have been producing, along with that, the sweet potato flour for about, I would say, in excess of 10 years in all told. Those are flagship products that we produce on an ongoing basis. Over time, we've also innovated with a few other items. There's the cassava grade cake, there's a sweet potato pancake mix, and also cassava pancake mix that we would have introduced at various points. And they are typically retailed through some of the local retail entities on island. I will acknowledge, however, that our scale of production and capacity is quite limited. Much of it is handcrafted, and therefore the capacity to actually grow beyond the scale of a few thousand bags in a month without the engagement of a private partner would be a challenge for us, and that is something that we have raised with the board and is part of the strategic planning discussion that is currently ongoing. And as we are able to develop those plans, we will bring those to the cabinet for future and further engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, there's someone else, yes.
Yes, good afternoon again, Honourable Ministers. As it relates to what we're doing to encourage persons to eat more ground provisions and healthy foods, obviously this is going to start with engagement in the schools. We have been working with the Ministry of Education as well as the Future Health Movement. I know before the Chief of Staff became the Chief of Staff, we did have a meeting with him as he chaired the Future Health Group to discuss how can we improve the health of our people. So part of the initiative, obviously, and this falls under the Ministry of Education and the National Nutrition Center, that is centered around looking at revamping the school meals program, such that we have kids that are going to be eating more healthy, nutritious meals. And so the discussion has advanced towards the school meals actually sharing what is their requirements with us and looking at how we can supply what it is that they require. We've also been discussing what are the other issues around getting people to enjoy what it is that they're eating. So we are seeing a shift in consumer trends, how they perceive food, as you rightly said. They want more pre-processed products or more variety and options in the foods that they're eating. And so this is where the innovation comes in, and particularly for value-added production, how can we innovate and create the types of foods that people are interested in? So as the CEO of BADMC would have indicated, the food promotion unit has always looked at innovative ways to prepare foods, but certainly there is more work for us to do in terms of expanding what it is that consumers are interested in, expanding different ways that we could provide options for them, or provide a sense as to how they could prepare different types of food. In that regard, we have to continue to work closely with the Ministry of Health as well as the Ministry of Education in rolling this out and getting that desire and consumption for local foods to increase and to expand. And tied to that would also be the marketing. In previous years, we had the Buy Local campaign, and again, pushing the whole consumption of the locavore movement, as it was called, and local foods. That has been also a key part of getting people to eat the things that are grown within the community, and it is to do more work in that area and to work with the other stakeholders who are already engaged in that area to encourage this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would just have one suggestion to add to your list, to look at baby food, preparation of baby foods using those same products for health reasons, and develop the taste from even earlier than primary. The last question has to do with Sea Island cotton. Again, another excellent product produced in Barbados. And I've been really looking forward to our developing a fashion industry, being able to use our Sea Island cotton. What are the plans around that? You may not have any for this year, but do you have them in the following 2 years to help us be able to take this unique fabric to the rest of the world? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Actually, we are doing work with the Caribbean Sea Island cotton. What I want to do is, first of all, let the CEO of BAMC explain what they are doing for us to increase the production of cotton. And then I know at the ministry as well, we are doing production there. We are doing cotton at the Graham Hall site. And I would let the officer in charge at the ministry also speak to that.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of Parliament. My name is Orlando Adderley. I'm the CEO. In relation to cotton, I just want to note that BMC is the only commercial cotton grower in Barbados. And over the years, over the last 2 years, we've been working with the Ministry of Agriculture in terms of the cotton crop, both in terms of technical advice, in terms of support with equipment. Between 2020 and 2021, we have been in discussions with the processor of the cotton, who delinks the cotton and then export it to, I think, Italy, in terms of getting the production up. I know for them there's a standard commitment from the buyer for £70,000, which is a contract that they have. One of the challenges that we've encountered over the last 2 years, as we have sought to increase the cotton acreage, we did 300 acres in 2020, and then we did another 300 acres in 19, and then in 2020. The challenge we've had is because of the level of outbreak, or the level of pests you tend to get with cotton. You need to have the equipment to manage the cotton, particularly when there are pest outbreaks. So what we have done this year, and I believe we're going to have a better crop, is that we have pulled back from the 300 acres, from the volume. We have made the investment in the equipment along with the ministry. We have focused on establishment of 100 acres with the aim to increase the yields. because once we increase the yields, and we understand the challenges that we face in terms of equipment, in terms of the pests that we face, in terms of pest management, then we can go back to increasing the acreage. Because the challenge for us is that at a commercial level, we have achieved pounds per acre of 200, whereas the ministry, who does it more on a research basis, have been able to achieve 500 pounds. So the aim for us this year is to get the acre up in terms of the pounds per acre, and then accelerate the acreage in the next crop. We see the value in it. We are currently doing a paper in-house on the value chain for cotton, because we know the value that it has. Anybody who would ever go on a website and Google Sierra Leone cotton will see the price for which the finished product is sold in the European market. So we see the value. The challenge has been making sure that we can invest in the level of equipment that is necessary to support a robust cotton crop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope that you'll be able to get those resources. My last comment is, let me thank you for the launching of the CARE program. It is going to be extremely attractive for urban gardening in Barbados. In St. James South, I have a number of communities who have started, although it's urban, have started community gardens, and they're eagerly awaiting your arrival to help us make these a success. They've been working very hard, communities such as Husbands Heights, communities such as Prior Park and Haynesville, and we are looking forward to your presence there with that CARE program. So I thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member, and I can give you the assurance that we will make sure we make our presence felt wherever you would want us to be, to give the assistance to the communities that are reaching out for some assistance.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honourable Minister, let me begin by once again sharing with you and the members of your team the pleasure I had in working with you as we piloted and passed that national vending bill. And I want to take the opportunity here today to congratulate you and the members of your team on the continued good work that you are doing. It has actually been a pleasure to listen to this presentation. I wanted to take your minds back, if I could, to the vending bill. The vendors in that bill are contemplated to face, in certain circumstances, the possibility of having to relocate from time to time. Certain circumstances might arise. The bill contemplates that if there was a situation of public emergency, for example, you may have to move a vendor from one place to another. The bill obviously makes provisions in an unprecedented way for vendors to be consulted on where they would be going and so on. Of course, we had to make provision for those circumstances which always arise in human course of interaction, where there may be an unwillingness to cooperate or an inability to find common ground. And if that circumstance did arise, the bill makes provision for government to govern, and there would have to be a seizure of goods, an accounting of the goods, and a storage of the goods. And in fact, there's a liability that attaches to the Crown. If we don't take proper care of the vendor's goods, then we would have to compensate the vendor to the tune of the cost of the goods that might be perished, lost, or destroyed. Well, destroyed and perished is the same thing. But the issue really is this: are we making any progress from your end, Minister? Because the bill contemplates that there has to be storage of perishables. And obviously, it falls for those markets that are under your jurisdiction to have a facility whereby perishable goods could properly be stored. And I think that there must also be a period of training so that your manager of market staff will be able to more effectively interface with vendors so that they can make sure that an accounting is properly done or an inventory taken of those things which may be held temporarily by the state. So my question in a nutshell is, are we able to say to the country as yet that we have made any progress in that regard? And if not, are you able to speak to what is contemplated by your ministry in that regard?
Thank you, Honourable Member. First of all, let me state that I also enjoyed working with you and your team when we were doing the vending bill. The area where you just mentioned in terms of having to take produce for storage has been one that has been humbugging me when we discussed the bill. We don't have the capacity really in the markets to be able to do the type of storage that will be required should there be an event that we have to store a large amount of produce, but we are moving to new initiatives, and we're looking at initiatives that would allow us to do blast freezing, that will allow us to keep produce so that it can remain fresh for a longer period of time. And that's the reason why we are currently working now with the establishment of the food terminal, where we can take produce from Barbados and store at the food terminal in terms of blast freezing, to give our producers a chance to be able to use those goods at a later period. We are currently working out the total specs for the terminal, and we will take into consideration the storage capacity that will be required for us to be able to do in an emergency situation, the storage that will be required. So between the markets and the food terminal, when it is completed, we will be able then to say with comfort that we can do the type of storage that is required.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you. Thank you very kindly, Mr. Chairman. I found the question and the answer on cotton to be very interesting. It was one of the questions I wanted to ask, considering, I think, the value that we could have from a cotton industry. The two questions that I have relate directly to the estimates. I see here there is a 2.6 million for special development projects, but even in the explanatory notes, there is no indication what that is. And I know we started a cuscus grass program, and I was wondering if this was it, and if it isn't, if we can have, if the public first of all could understand what it is we're doing, and if we could have some update as to what it is, how far it's going, and so on. Please, thanks.
Honourable Member, I thank you for your question. I have Mr. Wayne Baker here with us, who is responsible for special projects, and I would ask him to give you a response.
Thank you, Minister. Good evening, members of Parliament. My name is Wayne Baker, Projects Director at the Ministry. The special development projects really deals with the infrastructural upgrades throughout the various departments of the Ministry, inclusive of the markets. In fact, the majority of the work done at present is related to the markets. So out of the figure that you quoted, 1.8 million of that is directly related to the upgrade of 2 facilities, and then we have some small figures under 211, which is maintenance of property for those various aspects. So it does not deal with the Cuscus program, Cuscus grass program, but mainly the upgrade of infrastructure projects.
The Cuscus program?
Honourable Member, the Couscous program is what is in the program document as the NICARP program, which looks at not just couscous grass, but cleaning of wells and aquifer recharge. That program is anchored at the BAMC. The work has been ongoing, and I would let Mr. Athley explain to you the progress that was made with the program.
Good afternoon again, Chair and members of Parliament. Again, I don't think I need to repeat my name, but I would first want to give some clarity onto the question or the definition of NICARP. We've heard it mentioned a couple of times, but it is referred to as the National Erosion Control and Aquifer Recharge Program. And basically, the program itself consisted of three components. One was the planting of couscous grass, both within the BAMC farms, and certainly in phase 2, the continuation of the program on BAMC farms as well as private farms. In terms of the couscous program, specifically to your question, the program in year 1 centered around harvesting couscous grass from farms, both private and BAMC, and obviously focusing the planting around areas where there was soil erosion, soil running back into the road during the rainy season. To date, on BAMC farms, we have planted, in my mind, if I can remember the report, we planted about 26,000 kilometers. But what we also did as part of the program in year 1 is that we planted 2 acres of couscous grass at Wakefield. To be able to, for us to accelerate the program in year 2. That 2 acres is ready. We do have the resources. We have recently reached out to one of the larger private farms to bring them on board because like BAMC, they have lands across the island, some in areas that are quite hilly and where you get soil runoff into the roads. So I would say at this point, at this juncture, the program shall accelerate coming around closer to March when we expect the rains to start falling, because obviously we wouldn't want to go and plant the couscous grass and obviously then the grass struggles due to the dry period. So that 2 acres will be expanded, it will be harvested and expanded both on the private farms as well as BAMC farms. If I can add a little depth to the conversation around the well program, to date, we have completed 50 of the 150 wells that we have under the program across BAMC farms, and that in itself, in conjunction with the couscous planting, has led to the reduction of the runoff of water into the roads. Thank you. In terms of the sanitary facilities that I would just ask to share, we have received 3 of the 10 units. The challenge the manufacturer has faced has been logistics. I know from the most recent conversations, they are in the process of constructing or finishing the other 7 units. They've framed all the units out, and it's just a matter now of waiting for the sanitary parts that they've ordered, as well as the other parts. Pardon me? Yes. So we expect to have these facilities delivered, all of them delivered by the end of June. I would safely give that date, but I'm hoping to have it a bit earlier. So thank you.
My last 2 questions are fairly related. I just received them. One was in relation to, it was a general question in relation to the fact that this person seems to believe that we are putting all of our proper agricultural land into housing. And the question is, the statement was that we weren't very serious about agriculture. considering that we're allowing all the land to go into housing. And so what comfort could you offer to persons who may be of such a view in relation to the fact that we are actually very serious and moving forward to make sure that agriculture remains an important part of the Barbadian reality? And then the second question is in relation to the subsidies that are normally associated with agriculture, and what is being done to ensure that it is a little bit more self-sufficient.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I believe this matter has been raised before about putting arable land into housing. I wish to state at the outset that the Ministry of Agriculture does not take arable land out of production for housing. There's a process for this, and the Ministry of Agriculture gives its comments where this is concerned. If land is identified as good arable land, land that is in the irrigated areas, lands that have been identified either under BAMC, BADMC, or through the Ministry for Agricultural Production, it is not taken out of agricultural production for housing. There are many private people who own land in Barbados, and for various reasons, including them being marginal lands, will not be good for giving good yields. They have taken to looking at other investment. Many of them have come for solar panels. Some of them have come for developments. But once it is land identified for good agriculture that can give us good yields, we at the Ministry of Agriculture do not allow for those lands to be taken out of production. I've heard this over and over, and I want to state for the records that the ministry does not support removing land from agricultural production for housing. We do support marginal lands, because if it is not going to give us good yields, if it is not in production, then it is no good to anybody having it grow bush, have a monkey's problem, as people have been complaining about, and those lands therefore can be better occupied and used. But in terms of lands with high yields and good production, just like we are doing with Wheatfield and the Clico plantations, they're going back into production.
And then the other question was on the subsidies.
Repeat the question again for me, Honourable Member.
I was just asking in relation, there's been a lot of conversation. It's been in the public, it's been in the newspapers. There's been a lot of conversation around subsidies to farming. And I was just asking, what is the program for making, if indeed there's one, for ensuring that we have a more self-sufficient industry?
There are programs in place at the ministry that give support to farming. There are programs that provide incentives as well for farming. A lot of them are handled through the Services Department, which falls under the Chief Agricultural Officer, and I would let her respond to the question.
Thank you, Minister. I think sometimes we need to put the issue of subsidies, first of all, in context. The Ministry of Agriculture provides about $1.2 million in incentives to farmers, and these are
I'm sorry, Chair, I can barely hear you, Madam Holder. Sorry,
can you hear me better now? The Ministry of Agriculture provides about $1.27 million in incentives to farmers to encourage them to adopt new technologies. Yes, there are interventions that we have made to assist farmers, but the thing about it is that we have to put this in context within what has been going on in the agricultural sector. We talk all the time about climate change, and I know that the Cabinet and the government of Barbados is very strong on the impacts of climate change. But the group and the productive group that has been most affected by climate change has been the farming community. Insofar that, I mean, we are seeing significant drops in water, in access to productivity of our lands, of our soils. And there is a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of the innovation and the research and development to help our farmers to be more productive and competitive. In the meantime, while some of that work is being done, I mean, obviously, we understand that plants take time to grow, research takes time to be done, but at the same time, you have an environment that has been rapidly changing, and farmers have been asked to respond to it. Of course, we all understand the impacts of COVID-19, but also we see the impacts as well from the changes to the climate and what farmers have had to endure. We had last year an ashfall event, we had a freak storm event, and we also had a hurricane. Okay, and the first one in, was it 60 years? And each time it means that farmers have to start sometimes from scratch with nothing. These are very difficult times, and the same way that we provide assistance to persons in the community who have lost their homes, we provided food. Up until now, the Ministry of Agriculture through the Food and General Supplies Committee is still provisioning food for persons who have lost their homes. Likewise, we also have a responsibility to provide assistance to our farming community, who will be responsible for providing food for us in the event of a serious event. And I know we are all aware of what's going on with Russia and the Ukraine. So the issue of providing subsidies, no, we don't want to have a situation where farmers are dependent on government for a handout, but at the same time we have to recognize that in transforming the agricultural sector, which for the last 40 years has been declining, there has to be a point at which we provide interventions in the short term to assist farmers, while in the medium to long term the strategy is to help them increase their productivity through enhanced research and development. Now, with the right research and development support, we can help farmers to triple their yields. We can see the dairy industry, for example, double their milk production. That is true research and development, but it will take time to implement. In the meantime, farmers many of them are at the breaking point where they are closing. And just yesterday, I received messages from farmers stating to me that they don't know how much longer they can hang on. Their businesses are about to close because they have been struggling with high costs for a long time. Fertilizer prices have gone up by more than 50% in the last year. We've seen the impact also of poultry prices as well. So these are significant issues that have been impacting on the industry, and in fact I think that there is a certain responsibility to all of us to ensure that our farming community survives these difficult times. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Honourable Member who just spoke before me, the member for St. Michael South, in fact asked one of the issues I was going to raise, but I would look at it from a different viewpoint as well, because I noticed, of course, Honourable Minister, and first I wish to congratulate you, Minister, for the passion and enthusiasm and commitment that you have brought to your ministry. It is not an easy task. It is a major ministry, economic ministry, and in my opinion, you have done very well in it. I congratulate your team as well, because they obviously have given you very good support. But I note that in 2021, the country's food import bill increased by 7% over and above that of 2020, an additional $44 million, raising it from about $660 million to I think just over $700 million, which is, going in the wrong direction as far as we are concerned as a government and as a people. I think pork, the importation bill for pork increased over 50%, 56%. And yes, what the Honourable Member for St. Michael South raised has been certainly a perception, if not a reality, among many Barbadians for many years, that in a country such as ours, small, 166 square miles, that we go driving on a Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, you see a lot of land there, huge areas of land in the country that are not being utilized, and the feeling that certainly large, or at least some large private landowners have perhaps intentionally let land lay fallow out of agriculture, with the hope that, in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, they could apply for it to a change of use to go into housing. Now, we all know, every one of us, honourable members in this Parliament, know that housing is, in my opinion, one of the three most challenging areas of our development. Day doesn't pass that I'm sure each of us doesn't get a call or an inquiry from a constituent that we want a house, you want a government house. So I understand fully the need for housing in Barbados to help our people who want to own, understandably and reasonably, a piece of the rock. But the issue of large tracts of land that are not in use is of concern. And Honourable Minister, you responded to Honourable Member for St. Michael South, yes, that the ministry doesn't, has to give a note and would endeavour to make sure that land that is still arable is utilised, and only marginal land maybe you might agree or consent to be for a change of use. But I am wondering if that also pertains to land owned by private entities, private individuals, where, and I'm wondering, sir, what strategies you have maybe in your ministry for seeking to encourage private landowners of large tracts of land, to put their land back into agriculture as opposed to it lying fallow. Yes, I know that agriculture could be difficult. I mean, we're subject year after year to climate change, and obviously losses, both potential and real, in agriculture. You have perennial larceny you have to deal with.
Honourable Member, I would hate to interrupt you, but
yeah, the question.
We are very much pressed for time.
No,
and you need to land the plane.
The question, sir, the question is, what strategies does the Ministry of Agriculture have in terms of encouraging private landowners to put their land back into agricultural use?
Thank you, Honourable Member, for your question. First of all, I wish to clarify a couple of things, because in listening to conversation right across Barbados, there is this view that all land is good for agriculture, and that because the land is not in production, we are not doing anything to bring it into production. There are some lands that are just not good for production because the yields have not been there. and therefore those are what we refer to as marginal lands. They may be able to do other things like providing forage, for example. We have a livestock industry as well. So we have been encouraging farmers to grow grass, for example, to make sure that we can provide forage for the livestock industry. Then there are other considerations. Some lands that were in sugarcane production, we are now working with the private farmers because they have also introduced a project where they're doing king grass. And the king grass is being used for renewable energy, for biomass energy as well. And that project is an ongoing project and an ongoing conversation that we are having with the private farmers. So sometimes you may drive around and you will see land growing king grass as well. That king grass is currently being grown because the private farmers are getting into king grass, and there's a movement towards energy from king grass. Then there are other lands which you will see out of production. A lot of it has been coming back into production because we've now started a increased production plan. The BAMC is bringing back land into production. We are cultivating land at Bath. We are cultivating land at Mount Poyer. We are cultivating land at Spring Hall, and we are bringing land back into production as well. Many times, in order for us to be able to do this, we provide the equipment, we provide the cultivation services. We even go as far as providing the farmers with the inputs as well to make sure we get the increased production. Farming in Barbados takes on many forms. There's a mix to it. I've heard people saying that I pass and see grass growing, why isn't it growing food? But we have to grow grass as well because we have a livestock industry. In terms of getting farmers support, the ministry has been able to provide support to the livestock subsector. Yes, it has been difficult for them in terms of the increase in price of feeds and disruption in the supply chains as well. But this government took responsibility for providing support to the livestock subsector by way of subsidizing feed so that they can provide a buffer for the cost of feed as feed went up. The supply chain, and certainly when you see what is taking place currently, the main areas where we get grain and corn from is, well, Ukraine is one of the big suppliers. Now, I have immediately this morning asked that the ministry, through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, arrange for us to meet tomorrow morning with Brazil for us to look at options in terms of getting feed for the livestock subsector. That, in addition, to be able to produce more of our land, use more of our lands for production of forage, is where we definitely have to go. So yes, I would say we will agree that there is land that can be used, but all of it will not and cannot be used for growing food. And I think that's where the misunderstanding is, and that is something that we need to correct.
Thank you, Minister. The issue, my second short point, Mr. Chairman, is the issue
Honourable
of...
member, and make it extremely short, and I would ask the Minister, as he responds to the question, proceed to wrap up.
Right. The issue of encouraging our young people to see agriculture as a profitable, worthwhile career. I know the Honourable member for St. Thomas touched on this area in terms of historically, in previous times, our schools used to have agricultural plots, and I'm not too old that I remember that at primary school as well. But what, Minister, would you say that would encourage some of our young people who perhaps associate agriculture with bad times of the past, slavery and all of that? We know about the psychological effects associated with with land in that regard. What would you as minister say to young people to encourage them to go into agriculture, that agriculture is worthwhile, it is a great way to earn profitable living?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Through the initiatives that we announced throughout this entire presentation, including the use of technology, moving people in the feed program into greenhouse farming to do hydroponics, the use of freight farms, inducing young people to get into agriculture by way of providing them with all the services, all the inputs, getting them started, taking 40% of their production to market, and then setting up a food terminal where they can have access to market or storage facilities as well, because we'll be doing major storage there as well, is enough inducement through which people of a younger age will participate and are participating. We have a number of young people who are involved in apiculture. We have more people to train in the feed program. The feed program targets young people, and certainly the community garden program as well targets those people who have comfort within their communities and would prefer to remain there, but will have an opportunity to participate as well at the community level. So all in all, we have a number of opportunities available. Moving agriculture into the schools, you heard the CAO speak to this earlier this afternoon, where that conversation has already taken place with the Ministry of Health, with the Ministry of Education, and will continue. And we would also make sure that we continue to engage at the BAMC and the BADMC to provide the services and assistance that is required for people who are getting into agriculture but do not have the financial resources, can still get the assistance so that they can get a start and the market are made available to them. I wish to use this opportunity first and foremost to thank all of you honourable members who participated in the session to help us to be able to share with Barbadians what we have been doing in the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security, to help us to share our vision, to help to lay out the plans that we have for the sector, to help to share with the country our plans towards increased growth, to help us to be able to share the challenges that confront the sector, and at the same time bring the solutions that we are bringing to be able to provide the farmers with assistance whilst at the same time achieving our objective of getting growth in the sector. A lot of work is being done in agriculture. A lot more has to be told, and we intend to continue to speak to the public to get the message across. And I want to thank my entire team for the tireless work they have been putting in assisting me, providing guidance, providing advice, but more importantly, helping me to move the process forward. It has not always been easy. We have been impacted by COVID. Many of our members of our team were impacted as well. Throughout the SOEs that fall under me, we have been impacted by COVID, right on the farms as well. COVID has not been kind to us. We've gotten through it. And I'm grateful that we've all come through, and I'm grateful to my team for staying the course and helping us to get to where we are. A lot more has to be done, and we are going to make sure it is done. And for that, Mr. Chair, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Would you kindly move the head, Minister?
I'd like to move that head 83 do stand part.
The question is that head 83 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chair, I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Thinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of the Standing Finance Committee has reported progress and requested leave to sit again. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the sitting until tomorrow, the 25th of February at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honourable chamber stands suspended until Friday, the 25th day of February at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until Friday, the 25th day of February, 2022 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.